Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Knights of the Last Call. My name is Derik Melinda. Welcome back, Knight Nation, to a sort of a last-minute stream. I kind of forgot today was Thursday. Kind of got my days mixed up. It's been a pretty crazy last couple of weeks, and we're obviously between Origins, and now I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to go to Gen Con, where I'm going to be staying. Anyways, I wasn't thinking that I had a stream tonight, so I was originally planning on taking the evening and doing some more work on the Knights of the Last Call's upcoming Dragonbane mega campaign, which we are calling Dragontide. And we did a stream a while ago with just the patrons to talk about some of my design ideas and kind of go back and forth with some of those ideas as well. But I figured tonight I could just kind of hang out with you all, and you guys can kind of maybe understand why some of these processes are so hard for me. And because again, I've said it before, game design is very much a very specific and talented skill set. Just throwing some rules together is not the same thing as game design. And so I try to respect the process as much as possible. And that usually means I overthink it. But maybe that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's what some of these things take a long time to figure out. And I try to think through all these different eventualities and sort of try to create a cohesive experience in which there's a lot of input nodes and a lot of output nodes, and they all sort of tie together to create a cohesive experience. Let's see what's up. Oh, yes. Thank you. Ziggy. Dragonbane is on sale. It's been on sale, but apparently it's back on sale on Drive-Thru RPG. We have a link in the description below that'll take you over to the Dragonbane course. Now, of course, this is the PDF version, but I think it's $5. And let me tell you something, the Dragonbane core set is like the best value that has ever been printed ever. Now, obviously, in physical form, the value is insane, but if it really is $5 on Drive-Thru RPG, that is crazy. And of course, that's an affiliate link, so that means that we'll get, nickel. It doesn't cost you a nickel extra, but we take a nickel from Drive-Thru RPG and we put it in our own pockets. So thank you. Yes, John, sale. Free League is always doing all sorts of stuff like that. It's crazy. Which is stronger, mirth or mayhem? That's a great question, Michael. I think you'd get different answers depending on who you talk to. There are definitely a lot of people who are really enjoying Dragonbane for the chaotic nature, for the sort of craziness and the unpredictability, the lack of balance. You may call it the mayhem. But there are other people who feel like there is an unmistakable fun to the game, a fun-hearted nature to the game. I mean, it's duck people, for God's sakes. But it's a very strange sort of combination. But it works. It works for whatever reason. It works. Mr. Krantz says the one that is stronger is the one that you feed. That's a good I think they're trying to be funny, but it's kind of a good point. I mean, if you lean more into the sort of the Dragonbane chaotic, people are dying all the time, left and right, you're going to get more of that mayhem feel. But as I have said with games like Forbidden Lands, which is a game I have much more experience with, having been running it now for the past half year, as opposed to Dragonbane, I will say that these games, I think, aren't as deadly as people think they are. And to be clear, the creator of these games and the CEO or one of the CEOs of Free League basically said as much, that there's sort of a perception that these games are very dangerous and very deadly. And the fact of the matter is, they're not. Now, I'm not saying that they are as, you're as bulletproof as you might be in, say, a Pathfinder 2 game or a 5e D&D game. But for the most part, you really only get in if you only get into trouble if you put yourself into trouble. And that's, I think, very empowering. That's what's so fun. That's what's so interesting about this game. And we could talk about Forbidden Lands for a little bit, and I think we will. I do want to shoot down here to the Self-Confessed Cynic. Yo, I always love to shout out my boy Vin whenever I can. Vin, someday, buddy, I'm going to come visit you in Australia, and you're going to show me around. Is this replacing NR? So what Vin is referring to here is Northern Reaches. And the answer is no. Northern Reaches is our Pathfinder 2 mega game. We've done 2 seasons. Season 3 starting soon. Now, normally it starts in the spring. Obviously, it is not the spring. Things got delayed. People got busy. Smith in particular, who's sort of the primary architect of Northern Reaches, got busy. But I think it's a blessing in disguise for a variety of reasons. One is, traditionally, our Northern Reaches game works in seasons. Usually they start near the beginning of the year and they end near the end of the year. And this way people have a chance to, play through the game. And then the next year, instead of being stuck with a bunch of new characters coming in at level 1 and everybody else is level 20, which is kind of a problem when you're playing D20-based games, especially Pathfinder 2, we do this reset. So, number one, we're going to sort of let the season run a little bit longer than we normally would because we're getting a late start. But I think the real diamond in the rough here is Player Core 2 is just started releasing. And there's going to be a lot of people who are really interested to play these new updated classes, the changes to some of these classes. And what better place to do that than in Northern Reaches, which, again, is sort of the ultimate Pathfinder 2 experience for some people. So it probably is going to work out well, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that by the time that Player Core 2 updates get put into the Foundry module, system module for Pathfinder 2, we'll be ready to launch, and then that's going to go ahead. But no, the answer is this is not replacing Northern Reaches. This is going to be supplemental to Northern Reaches. So yes. Let's see here. See here. Hoyrit, yes, come through. It is only $5. Thank you, Hoyrit. Jackal, what's up? Good to see you. Roman, hello, howdy. Frosty, glad to see you. Wonderful to have you here. Sarak says, going to see if I can get a Starfinder 2 pre-playtest field test off the ground in half an hour, but glad to be here until I can. Yeah, that sounds awesome. In my mind, in my imagination, self-confessed cynic, that we always are seeking to outdo ourselves, you know? that's the way it goes. Karima confirming what I should have already known, that they're playing Player Core 2 PBX. PBX is sort of our tongue-in-cheek. I mean, it's a great name. It's a Path Builder Extreme, and it's a ongoing sort of community game where people make, they make different builds and they make different characters, and then they throw them up against really difficult, extreme, or even more difficult fights. So, Anthony, what's up, buddy? Good to see you on a stream, nonetheless. It's very rare sighting. All right, John. Well, we'll see you later. Hopefully, enjoy the VOD. Lord Dragon, hello. Stephen Glicker will take care of you at Gen Con. I've had a couple people, Mark, reach out to me and say, hey, you can crash with me for a night or whatever. And the thing is I don't like to oppose, and I don't. That's not my style. That's not my way to do that. But we'll see what's available, and I'm going to only go for a day or two. I'm not going to stay for Saturday for sure. The question is, do I come in for Thursday, leave Friday, drive home, or do I come in for Thursday and stay overnight Friday and then probably drive home Saturday morning? But Saturday is going to be too crazy, even for me, I think. And given that it's going to be draining for me because I'm not like staying in my ideal situation, I don't want to push it. Doc Flamingo, hello. Erica, hello, what's up? Thank you, Erica. Erica actually started putting together some design documents for Dragontide, and they look pretty snazzy, I must say. Gull is all hyped up about it. Roll Tide, the Dragontide, that is. I like it. Hey, what's going on, Amaya? Good to see you. We have not seen you in a while, so yeah, happy that you could be here for this. Archilian, or is it Arcalon? Maybe it's Arcalon. Thanks, Derek, for the great content. Been listening to your stream while planting trees for the last 2 to 3 months. Well, that is a noble pursuit. Nothing like long-winded conversations about TTRPGs to keep you busy while you're planting trees. Let's see. Gull says, Dragonbane is the ultimate emulator. It emulates the feeling of deadly combat. It emulates the feeling of a tactical combat. It emulates the feeling of adventuring in a dangerous world. But basically, don't be too dumb, and you're basically fine. There's some truth to that, for sure. D Park says, Forbidden Lands was the best solo immersion campaign I've ever run. Everything in the game oozes flavor. Tons of flavor. I really like Forbidden Lands, but but part of my problem with Forbidden Lands is simply that, it wasn't as dangerous as I think it was meant to be. Excited to see what y'all been cooking up. I mean, there's been some updates. There's been some changes. We'll talk a little bit about it. I mean, we'll talk about my design goals and stuff. Gabriel says, I love to see Dragonbane getting the spotlight. Yeah, it's a great system. So, and what's up, Sorrel? Good to see you as well. Hello, hello. So before we get into the whiteboard, which we will inevitably, because we're going to be talking about stuff, I do kind of want to share some thoughts with you all about what one of these games means to me versus, and to be clear, this is where we get into this kind of murky area. And this is something, Vin, who's been here a long time, will really appreciate, because we've talked about this forever. This is the system that Bob fell in love with. Yes. A lot of people have, though. It's been remarkably very popular. I'm thinking it's going to win the ENnie. So that's my guess, if I had to guess. But yeah, it has really appealed to a lot of people for a reason that we have discussed at length about why that may be. But it is an interesting game for sure. Well, the good news is it's very short, and the game there's not a lot of crunch to the game. So, a couple things I want to kind of talk about. And again, these are lessons that we learned from Northern Reaches. And let me talk just a little quick for those of you who have not paid attention. So this is why we kind of got to this point, because one of the biggest challenges that we have had with our mega games is that we typically, Pathfinder 2 being a very popular game, we might get to a group of 50 to 60, 70, even at some points in times, 100 players. That's a lot of players. And a lot of those players are also GMs, because we allow you to be a GM and a player in the same campaign world. And remember that in our version of a mega game, we are really trying to create, this isn't like just Pathfinder Society or organized play where everybody's sort of, just pulling from the same character pool. But no, we want this to feel like it's one campaign world, which is great. But one of the things that has come up again and again with Northern Reaches, and we've tried to make changes for this, we've tried to make updates for this, is that inevitably there's people who play a lot and there's people who don't play a lot. There are people who would love to play a lot, but their lives are very messy and chaotic and hectic and they don't have the time. And so what ends up happening is you have some people who are playing several times a week, and they might be leveling up several times a month or more. And you have other people who play once or twice. Or maybe you start off playing a lot and you get up to level 4 or 5 and you're playing with all your buddies and you're making friends and you kind of have your little cliques and your little groups. But then, you get busy at work or, you get busy with the kids or whatever, and you miss a couple weeks and you come back and all your buddies are now 4 or 5 levels higher than you. And, again, we try to solve this with sidekicking and mentoring and letting people change their levels. But a lot of these D20 based games, the level makes it very difficult for people to participate who are otherwise not able to play all the time. So when Northern Reaches Season 3 started getting talked about, at the time, Dragonbane was getting really hyped up. And somebody, I think some people have said it have claimed ownership of this, but somebody threw out the joke that, with all the hype that the channel had around Dragonbane, that we should use Dragonbane for Northern Reaches Season 3, because because at the time Northern Reaches has always been Pathfinder 2, and let's be very clear here. The bloom was off of the rose. The love affair that even the Knights of the Last Call community had with Pathfinder 2 had sort of dwindled, and there weren't as many people hyped about it. And we were in that weird phase where the remaster was kind of out, but not out, and nobody was really quite sure what the status of the game was, and everybody was kind of waiting. So there was a lot of hype around Dragonbane, and a lot of maybe some people, had moved on from Pathfinder 2. So there was a joke, like somebody was like, oh, we should use Dragonbane for Northern Reaches Season 3. And everyone was like, ha, 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 ha. And I was never, ever going to do that, to be clear. But I made the comment, I know you're joking, but that actually has some really significant advantages. And the biggest advantage is Dragonbane does not have levels. Dragonbane does not have scaling hit points, not in any reasonable way that most D20 players can think of. You could start a Dragonbane character with 15 hit points, and several months later, maybe you might have 17. It may be at most 19 if you took the one heroic ability twice. And that's saying a lot. And that means that, and also, additionally, because of the skill system, which is just a very simple roll under your skill. There's no DCs as such in the game. It means that while playing a character for a while is going to let you, get your skills higher, you're going to have a better chance of succeeding. A new character, very, very, very fundamentally, a new character could play with a character that's been being played for months. And sure, the character that's been being played for months is probably going to have a little bit of better gear and probably going to have a little bit better skills. But by and large, those characters are going to be nearly, not nearly, but in the same ballpark. I mean, case in point, if you made a new character who, you got an 18 constitution, then, you might have 18 hit points, and you're playing with a group of people who've been playing for months, and they don't even have 18 hit points. So there's a really strong appeal to me there, because the system itself is fun and easy and quick to learn, which is always a big plus. But also, it really supports this kind of style of community play. So that's kind of thing number one. So that was thing number one. Thing number two was, I like boats. I like sailing. So that's kind of how we kind of got to this idea of Dragontide, because we were talking about the idea of doing a Dragonbane mega game. And then I kind of threw out the idea of I was thinking it would be like on an archipelago, and we would call it Dragontide to kind of tie in with the dragon theme. And we kind of went from there. Now, another thing that I want to talk about before we get into the whiteboard is one of the things that I have admittedly struggled with during the Northern Reaches is, obviously Smith is the primary architect of Northern Reaches. And by that, I mean double primary. But, at the fundamental level, he and I talked about what our design goals were and what is it that we wanted to get out of the game. And I think there was oftentimes something got missed in translation between what we were doing, or what Northern Reaches was, and what the players or the people wanted. And this gets to this idea of, as a game designer, who are you beholden to, right? Should you sit down and make the game the way that you want to make it, with almost without regard for the people who may be playing it, and just say, this is my vision, take it or leave it? But at a fundamental level, though, if you're a game designer, right, you're making this game because you want people to play it. And so there's this really weird, difficulty. I mean, I think 5e is kind of a great example of this. When you're a game designer and you're like, I have a vision for how I think someone could play a game, and you're like, I'm going to create this game, and you're like, yeah, but there's a very good chance that no one's going to play it because it's not 5e. And so then you feel like, but what I want to share what I'm creating with a wider audience. And I want them to, I think I have something valuable to give. So there's a strong temptation there to sort of, kowtow to the wider audience. So going back to Northern Reaches, which again is our Pathfinder 2 mega game, there was this occasional, again, loss in translation, where Smith and I had a vision for a game, right? And that game was called Northern Reaches. Now, Pathfinder 2 was obviously a very critical part of that. It was the foundation, if you will, of the game. If the game was a pyramid, the bottom chunk, the bottom third of the pyramid was Pathfinder 2. But Northern Reaches was not Pathfinder 2. The way that if you're playing Abomination Vaults, or you're playing Extinction Curse, or you're playing, Agents of Edgewatch, that's sure, you're like, oh, we're playing, you might say, oh, what are you doing tonight? Oh, we're playing Extinction Curse. But what you really mean is we're playing Pathfinder 2. But Northern Reaches was not supposed to be that. Northern Reaches was supposed to be its own game. And the fact is, and so there was a lot of things and rules and mechanics that, that I was interested in, that Smith was interested in, that Smith encouraged and ran with, that existed outside of that construct of what Pathfinder 2 was. And what we encountered was that there were some people, this is obviously, it's a gradient, as all of these things always are, who were joining this mega campaign because they just wanted to play Pathfinder 2. And they wanted to play Pathfinder 2 all the time or on demand as it was at times. And they viewed Northern Reaches the way that you might view, the campaign setting, of a game. And so for them, the game elements of Northern Reaches were almost a hurdle or a drawback. And that's because to them, they just wanted to play Pathfinder 2. And this actually eventually led us to create some variants of Northern Reaches, one of which was the Northman Challenge, which was essentially Pathfinder 2 raw with almost no rules in that we added to it. And that was a very popular way to play the game. People are still playing Path Builder Extreme, which sort of came out of Northman Challenge. So there's definitely people who just want to play Pathfinder. And I completely respect that. But that was never what we were trying to do with Northern Reaches. We were trying to create a different game experience that went beyond just Pathfinder 2 and gave you something unique, especially as it relates to the community. Let's see here. Archelon, when would you give a HA, a heroic ability, in a West March type game? Ask me later. We kind of figured that one out. People say that about art. So this is Vince talking about when I was talking about who do you create for? Who do you design for? People say that about art, but they also need to remember that 99.99% of artists die irrelevant, right? So there's this idea, like I'm all for, staying true to yourself and not selling out, right? That's a good thing. But there's also a practicality that you have to take into consideration. If a tree falls in the middle of the forest, it doesn't make a sound. If you make the best game in the world, but nobody ever plays it, sure, you may have made the best game in the world, but no one ever played it. So what difference did it make? Considering your audience is a huge part of why editors are needed in books and why game designers shouldn't despair of your backsides. That's a good point. And Frosty says, Derek, you can never please everyone. Make the game you want always. And Frosty, that is good advice. Now, let me also, before we get into some other things here, right. Karima says, well, are you selling Dragontide or is it just something you find fun and if the patrons like it too cool? Well, Karima, that's actually a really great question. Because, our Patreon, obviously, things like Northern Reaches and Dragontide, once it releases, are part of the thing that you get. Now, of course, Patreon is set up in a way where you aren't buying something per se. You're donating to the stream, and as part of that, we like to, give back to the community. So, I don't view it as me, selling something. That being said, there's have I really done the community? At the end of the day, I'm trying to build something fun that the community can enjoy. And if I build something and the community says, well, no, nobody wants to play that, then I have failed. Even if I have created potentially what I think is the best game ever made, I have failed. I think that's my personal sort of take on it. Now, I agree you can't please everybody, but this is where again we kind of get into this mess of what is it? Why are you trying to change something, and what are you trying to add? And I'll talk about this. I'll actually get into this about why I'm doing it. And so another thing that I want to bring up. This is true for Northern Reaches, but this was really true for me. So maybe I will go over to the whiteboard here. So one, this is crazy. Hi, everyone just got here. Should I go watch the other Dragontide stream first? Probably not, GM Scott. You're probably fine. Just watch on double speed, catch up, and you'll be good then. So hey, Cybersmith, what's up, buddy? Dropping by before bed to say hello. Well, hello. Thank you for the support, Cybersmith. Hey, we're doing a lot of Pathfinder 2 videos coming up, buddy. So I hope you're ready to chime in. But thank you, Cybersmith. That's nice, very nice of you. Okay, so what was I saying? Oh, right, design goals. So a lot of people, perhaps, think that the number one goal, the primary goal of a game like this should be so that you can, play Dragonbane or play Pathfinder 2 if we're talking about Northern Reaches. And the this is probably already one of the biggest kind of, things that is different here. I don't view that as a primary goal of the game. And you might say, that's crazy. Why would you think this? And we tried to do this with Northern Reaches, and it worked really well in some ways, and it didn't work as well in other ones. The reason is because there are already so many opportunities to do this on our game server already. We have an actual West March, in the sense that you have one, GM, although now they've kind of expanded to multiple GMs. We actually have a game called East March on our game server where you can go and play Dragonbane. And there's also always people who are like kicking off new Misty Vale campaigns. I'm sure once Path to Glory gets out there, there's going to be people who are going to be running Path to Glory. So there's a ton of opportunities to play Dragonbane. But one of the things that so for me, this is not the primary goal. I mean, it's up there. It's a great game, and people should play it. But when I think of a mega game, I'm thinking of... I'm trying to think of a great example of this. Okay, so I used to play a lot of online diplomacy. The game of World War I, where you write orders and stuff. And depending on the sort of the pace of play, you might play on a server where you have to submit orders, on Wednesday and Saturday. Okay. And that means on Wednesday, you type in your orders and you send them to the central computer, which automatically processes and finds out if you successfully invaded northern France or whatever. So in a certain perspective, the element of playing diplomacy, the game, you might spend, 10 minutes on Wednesday night typing in your orders and figuring out, I want my fleet in the North Sea to go to the English Channel, and I want my army in northern France to go to southern France. It might take you 10 minutes, and you might spend 10 minutes on Saturday. But that's the time, quote unquote, playing the game. But when you play these games, what ends up happening is you end up playing the game this whole 3-day plus 3-day time period, because you're talking to other people, you're sending them messages, you're communicating, you're sending your Turkish or Russian ally, and you're saying, hey, have you heard anything out of Germany? Like, what are they planning on doing? Are they going to come attack me? There's this back and forth. So even though the game itself is only taking you maybe 20 minutes a week, in some ways it could take up your whole week, because you're just sending messages, you're talking, you're going back and forth just over and over and over endlessly again. And I really liked that style of play of being very engaged, because one of the things that is kind of the truth of what, again, we realize this with Northern Reaches, is that a lot of our patrons don't have a lot of time. They just don't have time. They want to play, they want to participate, they want to be part of these games, but they don't have the time to sit down and play a 3 to 4 hour session of the game. And you might say, well, that's what the game is. It's a TTRPG. And I'm saying, well, maybe it doesn't have to be, right? Don't get me wrong. This is obviously still what, at a fundamental level, this is what the game is about. It's about that TTRPG session. But we have this big community. We have, 30 people, maybe 40 people. So there can be a lot more outside of just that, sort of 3 to 4 hour session of gameplay. So to that end, one of my sort of design goals, with Dragontide was, can I create a game? I should say, can I create a TTRPG mega game where you may not play RPGs that much. I wanted to give people an option that weren't playing all the time, and be part of the story. Right? Because what these mega games end up doing, we don't have a meta plot. We're not like, deciding what's going to happen. It's all sort of organic from the course of playing the game. And being part of that community is what is so so interesting, and being part of that sort of buildup. And sorry, I got distracted by something KC said. He says, "Wait, currently catching on 2X. You mentioned Dragonbane being a contender for an Ennie. Went to the Ennie's fight to vote for best game, and I didn't see it there. Shame. Didn't even recognize half. I thought it was. I thought it was up for something. Any nominations? 2020. I thought they were announced. Was I wrong? Let's see here. No, it looks like I thought it was up for product of the year, but I guess I was wrong. Yeah, okay. Dragonbane's up for best cartography, and that's what it's up for. I thought it was up for something else, but to be fair, the cartography in the core set's amazing, so it is up for something. I just thought it was maybe up for best game, but it's up for best cartography. So anyways, I like this idea, this kind of crazy idea that like people can participate and be part of the game even if they can't really play that much. The actual sessions of the game. All right, and I think that that's a lofty goal. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that could work, but that you could actually play without ever actually playing any sessions. But a combination of being able to participate maybe on an off week when you're not really doing that much, and then also playing a system like Dragonbane where you could miss a couple of weeks of not playing and still go and be a very valuable member to a party, combined to make a really interesting kind of proposal for me. So a really interesting idea for me for that. Let's see here. Frosty says, for me, the goal isn't to play X game. It's to birth a PC and watch it grow with good or bad decisions while having fun with the other people at the table. And that's a great way to put that. The thing that's unique about these games, though, is the sessions. That's such a small percentage of the community that you're ever going to play with, right? The number of people that you actually go and play a session with is going to presumably be a fairly small percentage of the overall population. Maybe if you're very, diplomatic and you're very, very kind of open to gaming with anybody, you might end up playing with like 50% of the people in the game. But, there's going to be a lot of people that you never actually play with. And so I think that, having some focus on those elements is I think, valuable. Let's see here. D Park says, I'm really confused. Is it that someone in the global GM and says what's happening in the campaign this week? Can you recap how your mega game works? Well, we'll get there eventually. But yeah, we'll kind of try to walk through it. Erica says it's up for cartography. Okay, for cartography, yes. Years ago, we used to play diplomacy at work. We spent many hours, but management was okay if we got our work in. Well, that sounds sweet. Mark says, don't forget to vote for Roll for Combat. Good advice, Mark. I was never really a backstabber, but there's a very funny diplomacy story. I've said this before, but we were playing, there's a lot of variant diplomacy maps, and we were playing a variant diplomacy map that's just, Great Britain and Ireland. And you're like, somebody's Wales and somebody's Scotland and somebody's Ireland and stuff like that. And it's sort of like, I don't know what era it is, but you have 7 players, and we were playing online on this map, and I could never remember which countries were which. So I just referred to them by their colors. A lot of people refer to them by their colors. And I messaged green and I said, hey, green, yellow looks really weak. I want to go attack them. And I want to, it wasn't like backstabbing them. We didn't have an alliance, but I was like, I'm planning to attack here and here and here. If that works for you, maybe you could support me. And green messages me back and he's like, what, and I was like, I'm planning on attacking yellow. And he's like, I'm yellow. And this is one of those unfortunate moments where my color blindness really got me good, because I had messaged the yellow player telling them that I was going to attack the yellow player. So needless to say, I politely excused myself from that game out of complete and total embarrassment. All right. So what then is sort of what's sort of the core gist then, I guess, of this game is what we're trying to do. I'm trying to think here. Again, if you have questions, kind of ask. But I mean, there's just some things that we're still trying to figure out and work through. But as much as possible, I want to share, and I want to understand why. I want you to understand why I'm doing these things. Now, to be clear, I'm not a game designer, so most of the time, what I do is look at a game that has some really, really compelling gameplay that I really like, and try to figure out a way to actually integrate it with another game, not just slap the two together. Again, I'm not a big peanut butter and jelly fan. I would rather figure out a way for things to communicate and to talk to one another. So the first idea, and again, a lot of these two are just ways to solve certain types of problems that we have. I don't even want to say problems, but these are just concerns when we play a mega game. So let's start off with the basic, right? Why islands? Well, as I said before, why have a campaign where the idea is that, you have a bunch of, oh, my auto shape is on. Not going to be good when I'm drawing islands. You've got a bunch of islands, in the sea, and, the players all live in some port city. And, the idea is that you'll set sail and, you'll go to this island and have an adventure. And maybe the next time you'll set sail to this island and have an adventure. So why do that? Well, number one, like I said, I love, Derik. Derik loves the sea. So I have a personal, a love for that. But there's a practical reason too, which is this is a game world where you're going to have multiple GMs. Many people play the game and they GM. And in the past, we had this kind of rough idea of a zone, and GMs could play in a zone, and you could create like a dungeon. But Dragonbane has a pretty sizable element to it of overland exploration. I would call it exploration. There's a lot of rules and there's a lot of game mechanics that are kind of tied around, exploring a overland map. And we want to embrace that. So rather than have a endless plains or mountains or things or traditional hex, what islands allow us to do is I can say, okay, well, this is Bob's island. And Bob can create his map, and he can, divide it into hexes, and he can put whatever he wants on this map, and he can put whatever he wants on his island. His island is like his little fiefdom that he can create his own little experience. And, similarly, over here, Derik has his island, and I can build whatever I want. And that gives me a lot of freedom, a lot of autonomy, because one of the things that I really want to do is I want to allow GMs a lot of leeway to sort of create the sort of adventures and the sort of, campaign ideas that they want to have. So, the second reason besides loving the sea is it's practical for GMs. The other thing, now, some GMs have said, what if we want to share an island together? I think I would be totally fine with that. But one of the nice things about it is this way, if you're Bob, okay, let's say Frosty has an island up here. And, let's say Sunhawk has an island down here. Well, okay, so if you're Bob, and you want to be a player, well, then it's really easy. The only place you can't play is your island. It's very clear that that's your island. You don't play there. So Bob can go to Frosty's island. Bob can go to Derik's island. Bob can go to Sunhawk's island. But Bob has a very free reign over where he can go and play. Because there used to be this idea that, if you were a GM in a zone, which is what we called, then you couldn't play there because, you had inside information about the secret happenings that was going on inside of that zone that only the GMs were privy to. You could go play in a different zone, and that's fine, that works, but then we ran into some problems where, like, we did something really cool for a zone. We introduced this really awesome thing. Some people had signed up to GM there, which meant they never got to play there. And they were kind of like, damn, I feel like I'm missing out, because I don't get to play in that rule. So again, Frosty and Bob could team up to create this island. And I'd be fine with that. And they can both run their adventures there as they see fit. They can work together. They can bounce ideas off of it. But generally speaking, and that would mean that, Frosty and Bob can't go to that island, but they can go to any of the other islands. So that's one of the ideas that I wanted to kind of solve with this island concept. And again, the other reason being that I love, I love the sea and I love the ocean. So to that end, the other thing that I wanted to do that we've always done with our mega games is we've really, embraced this idea of clocks or, progress tracks or whatever you want to call it. And I really love the idea that when, you take your PC on an adventure, that you not only change your PC, right? This is the standard thing that we would expect to see out of most RPGs, right? You level up, you get new magical items, you become stronger, right? We're kind of used to this stuff. But the other one is true, and to be clear, that's almost every RPG, right? That's whether you're playing, your home game, or maybe you're playing your organized play, so if you're playing Pathfinder Society or Adventure League. But the other one is to change the world. And in my general experience, this can very much happen in your home campaign, right? When you have, whether you're playing an adventure path or just, a true sandbox at your home game, the PCs can do something crazy, right? The pirates, right? The Scarlet Brotherhood, right? This legendary renegade pirate, and they're led by Bob Redbeard, right? And they're a scourge of the seas. And one group of PCs has had enough, and they launch some daring attack, and they do some daring mission, and they sneak in, and they whatever, and they kill Bob Redbeard. Well, here's the deal. If that's happening in your home game, then Bob Redbeard is dead. And you have changed the campaign world. The Scarlet Brotherhood, falls apart. Maybe they break up into splinter groups, and there's a power struggle and a power dynamic, and there's a power vacuum, and all sorts of, critical fallout happens. But typically, when you're playing in an organized play scenario, like a Pathfinder Society or an Adventure League, or like an MMO, and let's not kid ourselves here, there's elements to this game that are structured like an MMO. I mean, MMORPG is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, and we're basically talking about an MMO. There's too many M's there. MMO virtual tabletop RPG, right? So it's a MMOVV RPG because it's a massively multiplayer online virtual tabletop role-playing game. So there's elements here of MMOs, but we've all been there. You've been there. You know what this is. Your group, your heroes, does the mighty. You slay the great dragon, right? You slay the mighty Ragnaros. The Fire Lord is dead. And then he's back in, 48 hours. And meanwhile, other people are fighting and killing him too, right? And so there's no real sense that you've actually changed the game or the world. Same thing with organized play. You go, you play your adventure, you get your level up, but I mean, you're very aware of the fact that a lot of times you can replay that same adventure at your next organized play meetup, but also too, that other people are out there running that same organized play adventure. And no matter what happens, it's not like it's going to change the outcome. Now, once long ago, and this is what inspires me. Once long ago, there was a really, 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 really awesome table trading card game called the original Legend of the Five Rings CCG. Okay, not the LCG, although the LCG is pretty cool. This was the CCG, right? Collectible. And when I used to go to Gen Con in the 2000s, they would have these massive tournaments of this card game. And, it's Legend of the Five Rings. So when you showed up, you brought a lion deck or you brought your crane deck. And these people went all in. I mean, they were kind of, at the time, I was like, man, these people are kind of weird. But now I really respect the hell out of it. They were dressed up. They were in. So it's like, well, why were they so motivated? I went, to Magic tournaments. I didn't care because this tournament I was playing, mono black. And the next tournament I was playing, Jeskai or something. The reason is because these people weren't just playing a lion deck at that event. They were Clan Lion. And the events of that card tournament would shape the story and the future of the entire game. All right. If if the Lion Clan won that card tournament, or if they had the best results, if their decks, everybody playing a Lion deck really shows up, does really well, gets a lot of points, then the game runners go, okay, well, you know what? The Lion Clan, I guess, wins the Emperor's favor, and they get promoted to the Emerald Champion. And they would actually change this in the lore. Like the next set of cards would reflect the results from that prior tournament. So this was a real way to interact. Now, the card game is the card game, right? The card game is you sit down with your opponent and you play a single card game. But what I'm saying is that the Legend of the Five Rings CCG experience was so much more than just sitting down and playing that one card game. It was about the whole ecosystem of being a part of community and watching as your actions, your failures, your successes shaped and changed the game around you. And obviously they were doing this at a very, very, very huge scale. Well, our advantage is that we have, like around 50 to 60 people. So that to me means that, we can really get to know these people. We can really get to know these characters. We can be very much tied into it. And what one group, because it's usually not going to be a single PC, but what one group of brave adventurers goes and does one day might reverberate and change the world for all the other PCs who are participating. And it's our job as the sort of, overseers or overlords of this game, and also the GMs, to sort of, reflect that change in the pattern. It's like, it's not pre-written. It's not, set in stone. I might have some ideas that I throw out there, but then the players might go in a completely different direction. And that is real agency. But this is agency on a scale that is, not something that you could ever get in your home game. So for me, the mega game is as much about sort of the meta game as it is the actual game itself. I want you to have a fun time playing your game of Legend of the Five Rings CCG, but the broader scale and the broader implication of it is, what can we do to make it more than just playing a game of Legend of the Five Rings? And again, Alderac Entertainment Group figured out a way to do that with this a very engaging tournament structure. And you could turn this one little game into a much bigger thing and feel like you're part of a much larger thing. So in that analogy, the sessions of Dragonbane are these, individual games of Legend of the Five Rings. But the wider game is that sort of sweeping, world-changing kind of element. Okay. So let's kind of talk. Sunhawk says Clan Unicorn all the way. Yeah, the unicorn's great. As a kid, I was like, oh, unicorn, that's stupid. But now I actually really, really respect them. Finn says that's wild. Legend of the Five Rings mega campaign. Anyone? Lord Dragon. That is on Smith and I's list so much. I can't even begin to describe for you how much that is. That is like our dream mega game, for sure. BattleTech Online was like that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great games where people really got invested in and got engaged with the community, and you could actually change, the shape and the future and the outcome of that game. All right, so let's talk about like the basic structure of this game and how I want everything to kind of work and flow. So basically, as we understand it right now, there is a town phase named Pending. There is the adventure phase. And these are sort of the two primary ways that you are going to engage with the game. Now, the adventure phase, this is your 3 to 5 hour session where you basically play Dragonbane. And for the most part, we don't really want to, impact or change too much of that sort of, Dragonbane experience. And there may be some tweaks, and I'll explain why that is. But we want people to go and play and have fun playing Dragonbane. But what the town phase is it's, it's the other 6 days of the week. And this is kind of where you play you play my game. And I provide you with a framework so that you can understand how it is that you can convert what it is that you're doing in the adventure phases into things that can change the world and change the actions. So, well, there's some other factors here too. Again, I always, like I said, I always really overcomplicate and overthink it when I'm thinking through it. But in my mind, Dragonbane is fun, but okay. And I'm going to say this, and this is not a criticism, but everybody has, I've talked before about, right, the fun versus interesting graph, right? Fun versus interesting. And this idea of designing for one thing or the other, and they usually come at the expense of one another. So I think that Dragonbane is really fun, but I'm not entirely convinced that it's all that interesting. There isn't the kind of depth of complexity that you get with other games. Full up. Pathfinder 2 is a much more interesting game. It may not be as fun of a game because it's more complex. There's a lot more moving parts, a lot more numbers to track. 4th edition D&D is the same way. And part of the reason I think people have fun with Dragonbane is because it's not that complex and because it's not that interesting. And you're in the middle of a TTRPG session with a bunch of people, maybe that you're playing with online, maybe people that you don't really know that well. The last thing you want to be doing is having things take forever, and you want to have, you want to be quick, punchy, fast. Let's get things resolved. Let's keep it going. Let's fucking go. Great. And that is a great experience to have, and I do not want to mess with that as much as possible. However, I personally think, and again, other people may disagree with me, but Tomas, the creator of the game, basically said during our interview, I don't really see Dragonbane as being a game that people are going to play for the long haul because, maybe after 10 sessions or 15 sessions, you're kind of like, I feel like I've done it all. I've gotten some skills up and I've got the best equipment I can have, and I'm kind of good. Progression is important to people. I know. People say, oh, I play just to play and experience the fun. Fair enough. But truthfully, honestly, tell yourself, if you were playing in a game where your character never advanced at all, it was the same character from session 1 all the way to session 20, like how much would you continue to enjoy that, right? There's a certain point of diminishing returns where you want to see your character change. And again, remember, we play these games because we want to see our PCs change and we want to change the world. I think that those are the two main reasons that we play. So I think it's important that your PC change. And I'm not saying that they don't. They do in Dragonbane, but it's not that complicated. It's not that complicated. It's not that complex. And that's a good thing, especially when you're talking about at the table or at the virtual table and, you're trying to get through the session. I'm okay with it being less complex. So I think this is an area where I can make the game more interesting or more complex, because I think that there's a value to having interesting / complex elements in your game. But the best part about this is, at least in my estimation of it, is that the town phase is what's happening when you're not at the table. It's when you're not at the VTT. It's, while you're at work. It's, while you're sitting down for dinner. It's while you're scrolling through your phone on the shitter. So you have a lot of time that you can invest into these more complex or, interesting decisions. And so to me, this is kind of how I can balance the two of them. One of maybe the mistakes that we sometimes made was that with like Northern Reaches or games. And when I say games, I mean like games that I have made for my own campaign, house rules that I have put into my own campaign, is I will admit, I tend to add interesting / complexity to my games that are otherwise simple. And, sometimes it goes too far and the game becomes bogged down by those additional rules. So I think what we can get here is kind of the best of both worlds. We can keep the adventures light and airy and fun, okay? And then we can take that complexity and we can take that more complicated, interesting gameplay, and we can put it into a different phase of the game that you can play, okay? That you can play I'm going to say offline, but basically, I mean, this is when you're not at the game session. I tend to add unnecessary complexity to my game. I didn't come here to have my home game personally attacked. Goddamn, put me on blast. No, I do that too. That is, I was talking about me. That is definitely my, I tend to add extra complexity because I like complex games and I like complicated games. And one of the things that I've come to the realization as I got older is I like complexity and I like interesting, but also there's I'm dying every single day. So there's only so much time I have to actually make these decisions. Okay. So, these are sort of the two primary ways that you're going to sort of engage with the game. And I want to again focus too is that at the end of the day, this is still the focus of the game. And I want the things that you do on the adventure, okay, to have a very sizable impact on the town. And I want the stuff that happens in town, to have I want them to have an impact on your adventure, but I don't want it to be outsized, right? Fundamentally, if somebody wants to just come on and they just want to play a couple sessions of Dragonbane a month and they don't really want to deal with any of this nonsense, then that should be a totally, completely viable path. And, and we basically support that. I support that. So again, I'm fine with that. But what I want the gameplay to be is I want it to be focused on the adventure. Even if that's not necessarily practical. What I mean to say is the people who are going out and kicking ass and taking names and being really cool, big adventurers, I want them to kind of be the big men or the big women in town. And I want them to have a little bit more, influence and say and impact on what happens in the game. All right. So, as I said before, you have the adventure phase, you have the town phase, and we have a ship game, and I want ships to matter. And the reason why I want ships to matter is because I want people to have something to aspire to. Some games might call this a treadmill or a hamster wheel. But I mean, the fact of the matter is it's fun to give people things that they can aspire to, things that people can build to. So at the start of a game session, there is a sea voyage phase where essentially your characters are going from town to the adventure. And Bob and I have been spending a lot of time on this because we want it to be, what happened here? What happened to my cursor? Why did my cursor die? Oh no. What happened? Mouse mode? No, that's not it. Jeez, what happened? Okay. All right, it's back. We want it to be short. We don't want this to take up, a ton of time at the session. But we want it to sort of be, we want it to influence the adventure. And we want it to be influenced by your actions in town. So what does this mean? Well, as a great example of this, it means that we want to make it so that the group of adventurers who, has invested in skills of sailing and has invested in skills that might not be the most, obviously everybody knows that if you're going to go explore the wilderness, you need bushcraft to be able to find your way through the wilderness. And of course, you need your combat skills and evade skills in order to fight terrible monsters, right? The basics of the adventure stuff. But, and to be clear, I'm not actually, I'm not actually like making this up. Dragonbane has other skills. It has skills like seamanship, and it has skills like, myths and legends and languages. There's a lot of skills in the game. So this is a way for us to reward players who might invest. There we go. My USB thing is still shorting out. Add that to the list of things that I need to replace. I need like a new motherboard or something, or a new power supply. I'm not sure. Somebody who knows more about computers should tell me. So the voyage phase is designed to now, to be clear, we want it to feel like you're going on a sailing ship. Now, we could have just made it just a montage. Hey, you guys sail to the event. You sail to the island. Tell us what you do on the ship to pass the time. That's the Ryutama approach, right? We could have done that. We also could have just said, hey, you're going to voyage from town to the adventure. We have a random table. We're going to roll it. We'll see what happens. This is what happened on your journey, and maybe it does something to your ship, or maybe it does something to your characters, and we move on. And there's it's random. It's quick. There's no real gameplay. There's no real, action or agency. You just, make a check. There's also something which I kind of became a little obsessed with, and I sort of eventually backed myself out of. But to be clear, I may eventually return. It may eventually return. I was kind of started to turn it into its own whole mini game, right? Like its own literal co-op mini game, like a board game. And I had to take a step back because, again, it's supposed to be short. The focus is on the adventure, and I was kind of getting focused on the voyage rather than the adventure. So that's where the focus needs to be. But the voyage allows us an opportunity to do two things. And again, this is from a gameplay perspective. The one is, so it rewards PCs for being great sailors. And by that, I mean, you might have a really cool ship that you have built out, or you might have a really cool item or something that helps you with the sea voyage. And people are going to really appreciate you being part of the crew, the same way that you appreciate the really strong fighter with the really great armor and the high weapon skill. You appreciate that character when you're going in and fight the monster, and you really appreciate that kind of grizzled wilderness woman who can, get you through, track you through, get you through any trackless waste. You appreciate that character. We want there to be a reward for sort of investing in the ocean and the sailing and being good at that. The other thing is, it allows us to, I'm going to say, mix things up. So by having this sort of semi-random phase before you get to the adventure, you can never be 100% sure how your adventure is going to start. It's kind of like a way to shake things up a little bit before the adventure starts. Because otherwise, you would say, okay, well, you sail, you get to the adventure, and everybody starts, full hit points, full mana points, full willpower points, no conditions, all your stuff's fine, and you're wherever you want on the island and start having your adventure, right? Just the same way that you have it when you leave, the town and go to the adventure, the dungeon. And especially in most modern APs where you don't really have random encounters. So part of the fun of this sea voyage phase is we can introduce these kind of random events that sort of create, it means that every session, you never know what you're going to get. It means that every voyage, you get a little bit of a feeling of nervousness. But also, when I say mix things up, the sea voyage, right, it could have, I'll use perilous wilds terminologies. There could be dangers that you encounter, but there could also be the opportunity for a discovery. And you might actually get a boon or a bonus, something that you discover while you're on that sailing voyage. And what this means is there's a little bit of excitement. There's a little bit of nervousness. There's a little bit of anticipation, which is all the things that I think a good sea voyage should have. And man, I could spend this entire session this entire stream just talking about this one thing. So that's the reason why we're doing that. Now, alternatively, I think people have already mentioned this too, but I don't want it to be viewed as, I got to turn off Windows Ink. Hold on a sec. I don't want it to be viewed as, as a treadmill, but it also is, it allows us to make ships important, and ships are a great money and time sink. I mean, I'm just being real with you all here, okay? It's a great way for us to give people something that they can just spend way too much time and money on and invest. Now, I have never been one of these people in MMOs. Smith, he is one of these people in MMOs. Smith, and again, to be clear, this is more of a when I say modern MMO, I mean MMOs of the last like 20 years. Most of the MMOs I played were, like 15 plus years ago. Nowadays, it's pretty common in these MMOs to have like player housing, or you have like a guild hall. It's usually some sort of instanced, event where you go and, what's the word I'm looking for? It's your private domicile. Like we presume it's somewhere in the town, but you don't actually, everybody kind of goes through like a portal and that takes you to your home. And Smith will go all out. He will go on whole adventures. He'll go on raids. He'll kill demon gods because he really wants this really nice piece of furniture that the demon god drops. And he wants to be able to put it in his foyer. Okay. So there's some people who really, really invest, in this kind of, fluffy bullshit time. Sounds interesting. I own Dragonbane, but I haven't found players to try it yet. The mix of system I really like. Oh, well, awesome, Sorrel. Well, that's crazy that you haven't found players to try it yet. Most people have said that it's very, very, it's very, very easy to find players because there's a lot of people who want to play it. If you ever want to run it, there's definitely always people ready to run it, play it on the nights. At the same time, too, maybe you can play it if you're not ready to run it yet. So it's a money sink. It's a time sink. Now, KC is a very smart man. Okay. Because I'm just going to zoom out here and, after the voyage, you go on your adventure and you're going to play for 3 or 4 hours. Okay. And then when you're done, there's going to be the return home. Now, there's a couple of caveats here, which is this, and this is just me being real. At the end of the session, at the end of the adventure session, the players have to go back to town. They have to. It just doesn't work for the purposes of this game because you have multiples of GMs. You have groups that may never, that group of players that you played with today, you may never play with that same group of people, exact same group of people again. And so we cannot have it be that your character is essentially left on the island. Your character essentially always has to end up back at town, no matter what. I guess unless they're dead. But the reason is, again, because you have to be in town to start the next adventure, right? And we don't want people to not play. I mean, I'm getting way into the weeds here, but when we first had Northern Reaches, we had a limit on how often you could play. In Northern Reaches Season 1, when your PC went on an adventure, you would be locked out of adventuring for a couple of days. And you couldn't play your character again until 2 days had passed, 4 days had passed, 1 day had passed. And then in Northern Reaches Season 2, we had a limited number of actions. You got 3 actions a turn, just like Pathfinder 2, but you could use one of those actions to go adventure. But if you didn't have any actions left, you couldn't go adventure. And one of the things that I personally have discovered and believe in is that we don't have enough players in the community playing this game. If we had 500 players, then it would be fine. But the fact is, there may only be 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 people playing this game. They're not always on at the same time. And so if there's a group and they're looking for a 4th member and you go, hey, I'm free Friday or I'm free Saturday, I totally want you to be able to play at all times. Because for me, it's more important that we get games of Dragonbane playing and running than it is for us to sort of bow to the simulationism over how do you get home. So this is sort of one of those things where, GNS thing, this is more of a G-based concern. Let's see here. Tabletop Nerd Josh is a little late now, but what's popping? Nothing much. We're just talking about stuff. Wouldn't forcing a town ending dramatically reduce the number/distance your islands could be? Like if you have to be home by dark, you can't go to the next state over. Amaya, yes and no. It definitely, one of the things that I'm really encouraging GMs to do is your island. This is supposed to be a shattered continent. These islands should not be, hundreds of miles across. No, No, like, in my mind, most islands should probably be, 5 to 6 or 7 hexes by 5. Maybe it's like 50 square hexes, right? So like 5 or 6 by 5 or 6 with, some changes to that. That would probably be like a fair size island. I want people to eventually explore your island, and then you just make another one, and then you make another one. And this is a way that we can sort of keep, the world fresh, and we can keep the action and the adventure fresh. And also too, when characters first get to an island, they may not have any idea what's on that island. So there's a lot of sort of more, zigzagging. And you're right, they may explore some of it, but then it's time to go home because, it got dark and it's time to go home. But the next time that group goes to that island, you have a better idea of where you're headed. And so you can very quickly just, make the right shot so that you can go to the adventure site. So you can go to the dungeon, you can go to the ancient temple, the ruin, or wherever you're going. Imagining Wind Waker Islands. So I am one of the 5 people who like Wind Waker a lot. Now, I'll admit, I liked it because of the sailing. But I never owned an N64 ever. So I have never played Ocarina of Time. But so I have no particular feeling about Ocarina of Time. And I owned a Wii, and I owned Twilight Princess, but I only played it for a few days before I quit playing because just playing with the Wii thing was just too much for me, and I didn't want to bother with it. I'm told Breath of the Wild is really great. I never played it. But I did have a GameCube. My girlfriend at the time had a GameCube, and we had Wind Waker, and I enjoyed playing that game a lot. So yes, it's kind of there's an inspiration there of Wind Waker for sure, for absolute sure. Now, I said before that KC is really smart, and the reason is because he's absolutely correct. What I am describing here is actually the play pattern of a Forged in the Dark game. Okay, this is your heist, or your score, as they call it. This is downtime. This is your engagement roll. And this is your payoff, heat, and entanglements. So this play pattern is awesome in Forged in the Dark games. And I think it's going to be awesome here as well. And so to the point where, even though it doesn't necessarily make that much sense, what's going to happen, again, I'm all over the place. We could talk about this for a long time, but so the game is going to be played where where one real week equals 1 game month. So we're not going to be concretely tracking time, but generally speaking, a Monday to Sunday is going to represent a month in the game. And that means that each week you are going to get a certain number of town actions, which we've kind of called downtime actions, which you are going to spend in town in order to do things that you want to, get done in town. However, when you go adventure, you will get bonus downtime actions for adventuring, which again basically means that if you go adventuring, you will get more time in order to go, do cool stuff in town, which should be the opposite. Because if you go out on a big adventure on the ocean, right, you should have less time available to you. But I don't want to punish you for going on an adventure. I want to reward you for going on an adventure. So come up with whatever meta reason you want. The fact of the matter is, when you go adventuring, you get more downtime actions. When you get more downtime actions, you can do more stuff in town. And then eventually you can have a cooler ship, and you can have a cooler PC, and then you go and adventure again, and then you make your return and you get some stuff and use that in town, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the play loop. That's the sort of the loop of play. Now Bob is criticizing me. How about you get some of the stuff we need done figured out? Gee, Bob, thanks. Gull says, I legitimately would prefer more sailing and wind waking, but I understand the reasons we want to condense things down a bit to voyage mode. Yes, I mean, this is obviously a consideration. I will say this. This is not a release thing, but one of the things that I want to do when I have the time, and then I was really excited about it, and then my house caught on fire, is I want to actually create my stupid little sailing co-op game, and I'm going to build it not in Foundry. I'm going to build it in Tabletop Simulator where it belongs. And I'm going to give PCs in the game an option to go play a co-op game with each other on Tabletop Simulator without a GM, because it's GM-less. And it's something that, that they can go and do. Hey, there's 4 of us available. Let's go play the Derik exploration game. And there'll be benefits to your character in the game. The PC that you have will make you better at this, co-op board game that you're going to go play on Tabletop Simulator. It's by no means required, but I like my idea for this game so much that I figured at some point I want to put it into the game. And more importantly, it gives people another avenue to engage with the game. Which is, again, what for me it's all about. Remember, like I said, way back at the beginning, this isn't just about people being able to jam as many games of Dragonbane as they can. For me, it's about creating a wide-ranging experience. And to give people multiple ways of interacting with the game. I digress. All right, so Bob wants to talk, so that we were just going to, we'll just jump into it. So we're talking about things that so Bob, why don't you tell me what are the things that we still need to work on? I have a couple of things that I need to work on. All right. So actually this is kind of one of the things that we have here. Crafting. And again, there's definitely an inspiration here from MMOs. Crafting is, let me go steal my Miro document that I was working off of the other day. So the way that crafting is going to work is we are going to put special materials into the game world. And these are going to be materials that you find as part of your adventure. Okay? And in order to make, so one of the key ideas that we have here again is, and again, this is something I learned from Northern Reaches, which is that, when people can change the game, it's really engaging with them. And, we had a lot of people who invested a lot of their time and their money and even their characters' lives into making really cool items, these kind of almost unique one-off items. And so I want crafting to be part of the game. I think it's a really cool item. But one of the things that we have a really unique opportunity to do here is magical items aren't like a commodity like they are in maybe a Pathfinder game. In Pathfinder game, you need to have a +1 striking weapon at a certain level or you just suck. So magic items just become this kind of chore of you need to have them. And then when you do get them, they're not necessarily that powerful because it would mess up with the math of the game. Dragonbane frees us from all those concerns. And so this gives me an opportunity to let players create magic items. But I want it to feel special. I want players crafting to, guess what? I want it to tie in. It all ties back to adventuring, right? That's the heart of the game. And so what this means, and I also want to encourage community and cooperation. So that means that in order to, and this is just me making up an example here, in order to create a storm silver axe, you need to have 2 units of storm silver ore and 1 unit of iron root wood. Now, you as a crafter or other players who are playing the game while they're out exploring these islands will have found these rare special materials. Maybe they found them in a small secluded glade. Maybe they found them in a mountainous valley. But these are going to be a fairly, uncommon, rare, or even mythic rare find. So they're going to be a limited resource by any stretch of the imagination. And then once the crafter has these, they can go ahead and put this together and they can create a storm silver axe. Now, of course, players can also create their own recipes. And what could they create? The answer, anything. They just have to work with the GM and the Overlord to create an idea for what a weapon would be or what an item would be. And so far, right now, we sort of have 6 ideas for what the crafting could be. Blacksmithing, woodworking, or carpentry, if you will, leatherworking, artificing, alchemy, and enchanting, ? We're not really sure about this last one. Okay, but there's a problem. This is something for me personally. I really, okay, here's the thing. I love cursed items, but I hate cursed items in D&D. And what do I mean by this? I really love items in D&D that give you something and cost you something. Those are my favorite items in D&D. Like, so for example, let's just use classic D&D. This is like, for me, this is like a really cool item. If you give somebody a wand of fireball and you go, yep, this just shoots fireballs. It's only upside. It's just an advantage. It only does this one cool thing. To me, that's very boring. I mean, it can be fun sometimes, but it becomes like a tool. It doesn't feel magical. But if you have a fireball wand, and whenever you fire the fireball wand, you also get blasted with, I don't know, cold or something, or fire. Suddenly, you're like, wow, this fireball wand's really powerful, but it does have this really weird drawback, and I kind of need to play around that. Maybe I can't use it because I'm low on hit points, or maybe I need to have fire resistance in order to be able to use my own fireball wand. So I've always really liked the idea of magical items having these kind of quirks, or these kind of, I don't want to call them drawbacks, but you probably would prefer that they aren't there, because they kind of, make things kind of different. Hardrick says, enchanting already exists within the spell system. Do you mean beside those? I mean, probably kind of getting rid of the base enchanting that they have in the game, Hardrick, and maybe making it basically part of this crafting component as well. And to be honest with you, Hardrick, and I think Gull agrees with me, I think the magical item enchanting spells in Dragonbane are very boring, because what they do is they basically go, hey, this staff can cast this spell, it costs your willpower, you can just use it forever. I think that's really, really uninteresting. So I would much rather these items have some kind of interesting or weird drawback, because that also means, but here's the thing, I don't want it to be standardized. I want it to be kind of random, because I want every item to feel a little different. I want every item to be a little unique. I don't want magical items just to be this, oh, this is strictly an upgrade. Of course I will use this. It's better in all instances. And I want there, and with power comes, responsibility. I kind of want, like, a more powerful item might have a more intense drawback. One of the things I talked about was like, maybe, there's 6 conditions in Dragonbane, for one of each stat: exhausted for strength, dazed for agility, sickly for constitution. And, I was talking about how maybe there's like an axe that is like, an axe of rage. And, somebody builds this and it has a drawback, which is when you, if you get hit, if you take damage while you're, wielding the axe of rage, you have to mark the angry condition. Now, maybe this axe of rage has some pretty powerful effects. In fact, the axe of rage, maybe it gives you a bonus. Maybe it gives you boons on attack rolls while you're angry. All right. And so as long as your character's angry, you can keep attacking with boon rolls, right? Or something like that. Again, it creates this interesting play pattern where Naki is correct as well. Again, John Harper is a genius. He's the best game designer, I think, of all time. And everything that he's done, everything that he has touched, and everything that's derived from Blaze in the Dark. So even games like Wild Sea, which are obviously very influenced by Blaze in the Dark and John Harper designs, are really amazing because people followed a genius. Exactly. Magical items become more like devil's bargains rather than just, here is this buff, here is this bonus. And so one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is how to introduce these kind of drawbacks or problems that are going to come up when you're crafting an item, because I want them to be there, but I also understand that, if you were a crafter, ideally you would want to create an item that didn't have any of these drawbacks. but I want them to have the drawback. So this is something, again, I don't necessarily know that I have a solution for it. I'm just trying to walk you through like where I'm kind of thinking about and why I'm thinking about these particular problems. But, one idea I guess I have is like, so, again, Bob doesn't want me to actually explain how any of our game works, apparently. He just wants me to work. So I apologize that I can't actually explain to you how this game works. Let's see here. I give the Quick Start Crown a boon against fear, but can no longer push with scared. Hardrick, I love that. That's exactly the type of stuff that I'm talking about. That is exactly the stuff that I love. Because it leads to interesting decisions. When you have a really powerful magical item, you just use it. There's no decision that goes into it. I love this idea of like, Nakia said, the devil's bargain and sort of creating something. Anyways, so this is something that why I want to put this into the game and how I want this to be put into the game. But I'm trying to figure out like how to have these drawbacks. Should they be thematically tied to the item that you're making? Should they be thematically tied to the materials that you are using? Should they be tied to the skill of the player who is making this item? Amaya says, how many is too many though? At what point does it become a hassle to work around your X number of drawbacks? That's a great point, Amaya. And this isn't a hard and fast rule that we've discussed. And I'd love to get your guys' feedback. Everybody's played 5th edition D&D. I think they were kind of onto something. I'm highly considering having a 3-item attunement limit. And, attunement even makes more sense because, again, this game is kind of like an MMO. And we have a real problem where somebody has a bunch of magical items and then they die. And then, the other party members pick up and now they've got a bunch of magical items. So there's a very strong encouragement, if you will, to create what EverQuest would call bind on equip items, which is the idea that like a magical item becomes like linked to your character and you basically can't trade it. You can't sell it to anybody anymore. And 5e uses the term attunement pretty loosely. But I think the idea is still kind of solid. And I think that keeping it to 3 is a kind of especially for like a permanent lasting magical item in effect, give you something. Now, I know what Gull's going to say. He says, I like magic items in 2 categories, but items that give some clear and specific benefit in exchange for cost and another. And then the other ones he's going to say are just some completely random nonsense, item that you get generated. And I agree, actually, believe it or not, with Gold a Cat. But I do think that it's the case that, remember, GMs are going to be able to create magical items and put them into their islands and put them into their adventure sites, and players are going to be able to find those GMs items, and they're going to be really fun and crazy. So, many items that break the rules of the world, but not necessarily in a way that's clearly useful, could be theoretically used by crafty players to completely dunk on me as a GM. Those are the type of items that I want GMs to be creating, right? Those are the type of items that are the weird, wonky items that I want GMs to create. Players are going to naturally, I think, be more compelled to create, clearly specific effects that they want out of their item. I found the limit necessary. That way I can drop more of the items since they can only wear 3. Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is like I also want consumables to be a big part of what this is doing. And that doesn't necessarily just mean like, oh, you mean like potions and scroll spam? Actually, not that. I mean, those are fine, but like I mean like if you have let's just use an example. Let's say that somebody had a portable hole in Dragonbane. I'm fine with that, but it's one use, right? Or a bag of holding is, one use. Like, when you open it up, you could load as much as you can in there and then close it. And then when you open it up again, it's just and all the stuff falls out. It's just an ordinary bag. I get why people might not like that, but I'm telling you that it's, especially for a game like this, number 1, more compelling. Number 2, it creates more of this kind of need to keep adventuring and keep doing stuff. But the most important thing is it prevents you from just trivializing and shortcutting entire aspects of the game just because somebody got an item once. It becomes a lot more interesting when an item is kind of like this one precious thing that you can use, but then you lose. And so even if it's really, that also means, by the way, we're letting 30 or 40 GMs, I don't know how many GMs we're going to have, they're all going to be making magical items. And we're going to try our best to, consult with them. But the fact of the matter is they're going to be all over the place. So if some GM creates a really busted ass magical item, well, the good news is if most of the time they are one-shot consumable items, then we don't have to worry about it breaking the game. Because, sure, that one time was insane. The players used this crazy item to, completely destroy this dragon, and it was like this epic moment. And great, you keep it that way because it'll never happen again because that was a one-shot item that some GM made once. So unless that GM randomly decides to put that item back into the game somehow, that is a use it or lose it. And also, there's also the mega elixir rule. Anybody who's played Final Fantasy knows this. The moment you get a mega elixir, this one use powerful, item, you never use it because you're always saving it for when you really need it. And then you're like fighting the final boss of the game. After this, the game ends. There's just cutscenes. There's no more fights. And you still are hesitant, to use it. So yeah. Let's see. Yes, that's another good reason too, Lord Dragon. Consumables also kind of encourage that kind of, rat race, hamster wheel, treadmill experience. D Park, I completely agree with you. Players will, if allowed, optimize themselves out of the fun. Yes, you are 100% correct. Players cannot help themselves. They will always do this again and again. I'm not saying that we need to protect our players too much from themselves, but they will always do this again and again and again. Any case, yeah. So and while I'm not saying like everything needs to be consumable, what I am saying is that there's a lot of compelling gameplay to that because it becomes much more interesting. And more important than that, it means that, there's a tendency for players, once they find like a winning strategy, to just keep using that strategy over and over and over again. And it becomes stale. It becomes boring. I think that, forcing your players to have to continually innovate and come up with new solutions to new problems using new tools, I think is far more interesting than, the alternative, which is, hey, we found some random combination of stuff and we just keep using this over and over again because it's really, really effective. Spells in most, D&D games are basically that, right? You're like, right. I cast sleep. Well, I'm going to cast sleep. I'm going to cast sleep. I'm going to cast sleep. Right. This spell is just really, really good. And it kind of can auto win the fight. And, we're good for there. To be fair, Gull, I think your statement here of, people leading, I'll keep it just in case. I want people to use cool stuff. Yeah, a recharge condition is fine. That's also, I'm not opposed to that. I think that's totally reasonable. I just, there needs to be something to it that is a little bit more interesting. Also, I think you underestimate how much people would be like, fuck it, we ball, and they'll just, use their one use item just to kind of, blow something up and be really awesome. Bob, what else? I'm kind of getting distracted here. Bob, what else are we trying to figure out here? Without actually telling people how the game works. We figured that out. I would rather have a weak infinite use item because I'm a wealth miser. And you know what, Dan? I respect your honesty. And I think most people who play TTRPGs become what you are describing. They are a wealth miser. Bob says end of session. Okay, great. So here, this is a great example of kind of going back to game design. All right. So at the start of the session, you're going to go do on a voyage, and then you're going to get to your island and you're going to have a fun adventure. The fact of the matter is, most of the time, especially in these virtual tabletop games, the game starts, you have this 20 minutes of the voyage, And then, you have your adventure on the island. Maybe that takes 3 hours. And then suddenly, everybody realizes, oh shit, look at the time, right? And you have, 5 minutes for cleaning everything up. That's very common. And again, everyone has to be back in town at the end of the session. So what this means is at the end of the session, we need to wrap things up really quickly. And we need to sort of represent your characters, taking what they've got, getting back on their ship, and going back home. But whereas the voyage phase was kind of full of agency, and maybe the players get to make a couple skill checks, and maybe you have your ship do something really cool, this sort of cleanup resolution thing needs to be lickety-split, because most of the time people are going to play up until the very last minute, and then it's going to be really quickly. We need to kind of figure out what we're doing. So that being said, there are game patterns that I want to, there's sticks and there's carrots. And there are gameplay patterns that I want to encourage, and I can use that through sticks and carrots. So one of the things that we talked about was that after you go on an adventure, right, you get awarded with downtime actions in town, 3 town actions. That can be that's part of your reward for going on an adventure. Again, doesn't necessarily make sense. But I want to encourage people to go adventure. I want them to feel benefited from it. But one of the things that we talked about doing was giving you a penalty if maybe your ship got damaged during the initial voyage phase, or you ended the session not at your ship. So obviously you have to be back in town. We can't change that. But if your characters have journeyed across the island and they're in the middle of the dark, impenetrable wilderness, maybe they're even in the middle of a dungeon, and suddenly somebody goes, oops, look at the time. We got to wrap this session up. I got to go pick up my kids. The session has to end. It just has to. That's the reality of the situation. Now, I would love to encourage players to be like, no. At the end of the session, you must get back to your ship. If you don't get back to your ship, you're stuck on that island. And we can't do that. We can't do that because you have to be back in town, So one of the things that we can do, though, is we can use sticks, or we could use, as I said before, carrots. And this would be an example of using a stick, which is to say, hey, if you're and by the way, this could also be a thing that the GM kind of makes a decision about. And there's a little bit of verisimilitude here, right? Where it's like, well, if you end the session at your ship, it's like you sail, you take off, you're energized by your adventure. You kind of went out, did your heroic thing, came back to your ship and set sail for home. And when you get there, you got your 3 town actions to go and, build your, research your next spell, craft your next cool magical item. But if the group ends it not there, we could say, and the GM might say, yeah, hey guys, I'm only going to be awarding you 2 town actions, or maybe 1, or maybe 0. And this is, again, a lever. This is a knob, right? That the GM, now Hardrick, very smart, just like, World of Warcraft, right? We could also rephrase it as, you get 0 town actions after an adventure, but depending on how well you do, like, do you get back to your boat and all this other stuff, you get bonus town actions. So that actually is that's actually very smart, because now it is an interesting way of putting it. I think we'll probably stick with the default, because again, I want the default to be you get more downtime actions. I want people to that is the default. That's what you should be getting. The big issue is, if we tax too much, is it even worth adventuring? Well, of course it's worth adventuring, Bob, because adventuring, number one, Adventuring is still the best way to get your experience and get your skills up, right? We know this. Number 2, adventuring is going to be the only way that your character is going to be able to get those raw special materials that they can use in order to craft these really cool magical items and superior items. Number 3, and we haven't really talked about this, but the town phase, okay, has the town phase over here, sort of the downtime phase, okay, it has its own set of resources. Now, remember, like I said, the town is supposed to be the more complex, decision-filled choices. And so what we're currently working with is that your character will have, by the way, this is also was originally inspired by, you guessed it, Blaze in the Dark. So in town, your player character will have 5 resources. It's going to be wealth, supplies, knowledge, influence, and I'm calling the last one mana. These are the 5 resources that you will use in order to get shit done in town. Okay? So let's say that there is a project in town that it's like, we want to build a new wharf. We want to build a new dock for the city, for the town. Okay, well, that's probably going to take, some amount of wealth, a good amount of supplies, and, maybe a bit of knowledge and a little bit of influence. And so the community of players is going to have to sort of build together or work together and come up with these resources. And there's different ways to get these resources in town, and there's but the easiest, I should say, easiest is kind of calling it something because you have to go play the game. One of the best ways to get these resources is going to be adventuring, right? Wealth is very easy. What's the easiest way to get wealth? Is gold, right? You'll be able to convert gold coins into wealth. And by the way, for anybody who's keeping track at home, okay, coin, stash, okay? For our Forged in the Dark aficionados. If gold is coin, then wealth is stash. So, gold represents the dollar bills, the money in your wallet, in your pocket, right? Wealth represents your, savings, your investments, your letters of marque, your credits, your line of credit. It represents like your financial buying power. So on the adventure, your character might earn a bunch of gold. Now, there might be ways in town to earn some wealth, but none of it is going to be as baller or as easy as coming back from an adventure laden with bags of gold and just saying, yeah, I'm going to convert this all into wealth, and I'm going to be Mr. Big Moneybags. Now, I should point out something here. A player never has to do this. A player could take all their gold from an adventure and say, I don't care about anything in the town. I'm going to use my gold to go buy a better item or a better, a better suit of armor or a better suit of, thing. And then I'm going to go on my next adventure. Somebody's playing Thursday. I'm going to go play. And your character basically is not interacting with the town. You don't have to. The town is just an option for people who want to interact with the world on a larger basis. And they want to do it when they are not playing the game. Now, as I said before, when you're playing the game and you're going on an adventure, you might go take out the Scarlet Brotherhood because you guys attack their secret pirate base and you fight your way up their ship. And the GM runs this amazing session. I probably give them a ton of credits because it sounds like the most amazing thing of all time. And you fight your way and you kill Bob Redbeard and the Scarlet Brotherhood is broken forever. So you are fundamentally shifting the entire game world because you had this badass, awesome adventuring. But I understand that not everybody can play as much as that. So, why not make earning town actions a checklist like experience? Okay. Well, as I said before Bob said I wasn't allowed to talk about the rules. In town, each week, okay, so like on Monday, your PC gets downtime actions, and it depends on your character's charisma and their intelligence. And this is actually something that we're going to do. We're going to tell people in the campaign guide, hey, if you're a player who thinks that they won't be able to play in a ton of sessions, and you still really want to participate in the city, you want to participate in the town, we recommend that you make a character with a higher charisma and or higher intelligence, because that's going to give you more downtime actions. And that means that maybe that week you didn't even get to go on a single adventure once. But it might mean that you have more actions and more opportunities to do stuff in town, to respond to the events. If you've played Northern Reaches, you know about the events, the clocks, the things that the town is trying to build for the town, to defend it or to do something sweet and new, to give everybody a new option or a new buff. And that's going to be a lot easier if you have a lot of downtime actions. Now, there's two ways to get a lot of downtime actions. One is to have a character with a high charisma and a high intelligence. The other way is to go adventure a bunch. And so, I obviously a character with high charisma, high intelligence, who also goes and adventures a bunch, will have the most. I mean, that is the way it goes. That's kind of where the downtime things go in here. Is Dragontide going to have a world map? Yes, but it's going to be like a point crawl map. We are not going to do hex-based ship travel. But my intention is that when people put their island, we're going to stick it somewhere on a map, and slowly as people add islands, the world will be explored and we'll actually have a real map that people can look. It's kind of functionally worthless in a sense, because we're not like, the actual physical distances, right? Everything's just going to be like, this is the journey from town to your island. But, and maybe some of the distances are maybe the map isn't necessarily to scale, but I ideally I want to put labels in. I want to put towns in there, labels. I want it to make it look pretty, and not just have it be. In fact, it would probably be more designed to be more of an artistic map than it would be to be like a functional gameplay map. And I really want to create this like artifact of our campaign, for everybody. Hardrick says Tavern Mage, and anybody who played Northern Reaches knows that we had characters who basically spent a vast majority of their time playing Northern Reaches by just chatting in character in roleplay channels and talking to one another and, shooting the shit. And so that is a style of play that, believe it or not, some people find really compelling. And it's a great way for them to still feel like they're part of the adventure. Now, this is my way of saying, in Northern Reaches, the only way that you could affect these world clocks or these world events was by going out and doing adventures. In Dragontide, you could still totally do that, but I'm also going to give people in town the ability to use their downtime actions and spend some of their resources, these wealth, supplies, knowledge, influence, mana, and they will also be able to influence the events of the campaign world. And that's really important to me because that allows those people to be active and participants. And I think if we keep the activity level and the interest level high, then we can keep the game going a lot longer and keep people much more invested and engaged. So part of it is at this end of session, we just need to figure out, when we're kind of cleaning things up very quickly, we need to figure out how many downtime actions people get. And then there's also this idea of, we want to, some of these things are such niche things. I know it doesn't seem like they matter, but like in a home game where you're just playing with your GM, you might have a character in your party who has a good bartering skill. Maybe they're a merchant character, but that's a skill in the game. And the bartering skill lets you sell items for more or buy them for less. And so at the end of an adventure, if you're playing your home game, right, you and your players will go all the way back home And then, you role play through that and you get to town, and then, you're sitting there in town with your group of fellow players, and the GM, you're going, oh, I go to the merchant and I start saying, oh, would you buy this master sword? And the person goes, I'll give you 50 gold for it. And then the person says, I'm going to make a bartering roll. I'm going to try to get 60. And you can do that back and forth. And that's like part of playing role-playing games. Some people like that stuff. Some people don't. Problem is, and I want to encourage people to have things like the bartering skill. But the problem is we can't do that because the session ends. It doesn't even end in town, right? It just ends on the island and then you're teleported back to town. So part of what we need to figure out here is how can we quickly deal with like selling loot, getting rid of items, figuring out what the party wants to keep, what the party doesn't want to keep, and then still allowing players to sort of maybe use some of their skills or abilities in order to, maybe get a little bit more money out of something or something like that, if that makes any sense. So that is one thing that I'm trying to figure out, because I don't want to make it too complicated, but I also don't want to shortchange players this ability to do stuff. There's also, as I said before, I like a lot of my things are like, I like to give people options. So there's a part of me that likes the idea that at this end of session phase, because there's been this kind of debate, I'll let you guys know, about what players should do or what we should do with what we're calling miscellaneous gear and loot. Right. And I'm talking about like people picking up everybody's like random swords and, random items that they drop. And then there's a natural tendency to want to just sit there and sell each item block by block by block. And then it's like a question of, well, how much are we selling this for? And again, that's fine. It's not really the most compelling gameplay, but we don't have time for it. At the end of the session's over. And so there's not as much time for that. And so one of the ideas that I had was, is there a way that we can create some kind of system that can very quickly convert stuff like miscellaneous gear and loot, like the weapons and armor that you picked up off of the dead people that you killed, that we can very easily convert it into some of these town resources and just kind of abstract it, make it a little bit easier. Like one idea I even had with Bob is, one of the treasure types in Dragonbane are books. And, there's kind of, in theory, there's sort of a use to them. If the book is about something, it gives you a boon to checks against that book, which is fine. But, that might be hard to split and it might be hard to sell. And we could just sell it for gold. That is an option. We could just sell it for gold. But one of the ideas I had is maybe and again, I want to encourage players to have different skills and have different actions and have different players, different professions, different classes in their game. So maybe on your adventure, you brought along a scholar character, and maybe they have a really high languages skill. And at the end of the session, they're able to make a languages check, and they can convert some of those books that the group found, and they can convert them into knowledge, which is a town resource. Basically, the scholar, on the way back, it's almost like a quick montage. Like, what was the scholar doing? He was deciphering these strange tomes. And how do we represent that? Well, there's a lot of different ways we could represent it, but one of the options is to represent it with this generic knowledge resource. Now, I get it, that you might go spend that knowledge resource to go, I don't know, build a tavern. But the idea is just, it's more about the feel. It's more about the emulation. It's the idea that the scholar was able to take those books and turn them into knowledge. And the party as a whole was able to benefit from the scholar being with them. And so it's like this combination of, you have, a cool PC who has this cool ability or this cool skill, and then you found this, you did this deed, or you found this really cool piece of loot. Okay. And you're able to take that and create some sort of, a reward from that action. Because again, you could just find a book and then say, we sell it for gold. well, that's fine, I suppose. Or someone could say, well, I'm going to keep it. You could do that. But, there's this kind of weird idea of like, maybe it's better if we create more abstract concepts with that because it's easier to split up amongst the party. And it provides a reason and an incentive for players to invest in maybe some of these skills that otherwise aren't as important in the game. Sorry, I'm just catching up here. Gull says, I strongly approve of using pictographic overworld maps. Strong, yes. If there's a player that can't adventure but is doing projects, can players do stuff like post bounties or caravans? William, I would absolutely encourage that. Like, if I'm a crafter and I really need some, frost silver ore, and I'm like, hey, we'll probably have it, it'll be like the town tavern, and I can make a post and I say, hey, I'm offering this. I'm offering this gold, or I'm offering this item, or I'm offering these resources. If someone can successfully, adventure and bring me back 2 units of frost silver ore, I will pay. Yeah, I think that's awesome. And that's the kind of community engagement that I actually want to encourage and that I actually want to push. And by the way, that will then lead players to go, well, where can we find frost silver ore? And then someone says, oh, well, Bob has that ice island that he has, and people have found frost silver ore there before. We should see if Bob's free. We should set up an adventure to go to Bob's Island, and we should go there with the intention of, exploring and finding treasure and finding things, but we're really there to find this mysterious magical ore that only resides in these icy peaks. And that is the premise for the adventure, but it's also tied to this reward cycle, which is also tied to this community engagement cycle. And so everybody's kind of reliant upon each other. You've created this sort of economy, but the economy is based off of adventuring, which is why I think it works. Could you do it like FL and 1 goldish equals 1 town action? What is FL? You mean Forbidden Lands? Forbidden Lands has a town action for gold? I don't even know what that is. You have to explain to me what that means, Amaya. Dan, I have not looked at Frosthaven. Gloomhaven, I own, I played the shit out of, but I actually never looked at Frosthaven. Tied to a profession or tied to a skill? Tied to a skill, Hardrick. I said profession, but I meant skill. How will spells like Farsight work, specifically the distance aspect and the ability to use it during downtime? So, Sean, this is one of those things where we have a post where I said problematic spells and abilities, and this is one of those things where it's like we have to rely on the sort of the players that have played the game a bunch. But the long and the short of it is, Sean, if something would be abusable because it's spammable, that is probably something that we'll have to change. So let's take a look at what Sean is talking about. Nope, that's not what I wanted to go to. There we go. Dragonbane rulebook. I'm assuming this is a mentalism spell. Yep, okay. All right. So this is Farsight. And spells, by the way, they just cost willpower. And you get all your willpower back when you rest. So this means essentially in town, even if you were playing normal Dragonbane, if you're in town for a week, you could cast this spell several times a day and it wouldn't matter because you get all your willpower back every day. So the normal range is 1 kilometer. Not great, but great, probably very useful for when you're adventuring. However, you must have, well, now, Sean, I'm curious here. It says, you must either have the place in sight or have visited it previously. Is that not something that you have been paying attention to? So, because I agree with you that 100 kilometers at power level 3 is a lot, but you know, that is 100 kilometers is not something in sight. So maybe we don't have to worry. Maybe we don't have to worry about this. That being said, let's imagine that it didn't have this line that you must have either had the place in sight or visited previously. What we would probably do is turn this into some sort of downtime action, and it would just take one of your downtime actions, because it's the only way that we can do this and still make it have a real cost, because otherwise it's just free and you could just do it. Also, there's no GM when you're not in the town. Oh, okay, right. I visited a throne room as a prisoner, escaped, and was able to spy on it from town. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I would just say it probably takes a downtime action. I mean, when in doubt, we'll just say it takes a downtime action, because again, there's no GM, you know, so like there's no way to really manage this. But this is a good indication of where things need to be integrated. But it's very easy to just sort of say, yeah, I mean, downtime action means you took your time to do something. And sure, the casting time for this is a word and a gesture. But, you know, it used up some of your willpower, and maybe that drained you a little bit. And, you know, we're kind of balancing the game with the simulationism here. Okay. So I don't know. Yeah. Let's see. William says you could potentially sell it as scrap metal for Smith or for the militia or a player's forces, so a player could use downtime to set up a fortress on an island that adventurers have cleared. You know, we really haven't talked about that too much. I don't know how much of an advantage that would be, but you know, one of the key concepts of Northern Reaches, which we are going to keep here, is that players can propose anything. So, you know, if a player goes, you know, hey, there's that island, Bob's Island, we've kind of conquered it, and I want to set it up as like a base to defend against pirate attacks against the town. You know, the overlords, the people running the game, me and Bob and whoever else, are going to go, yeah, that sounds really cool, and we'll tell you, okay, you need to create a new project. It's going to require, 10 wealth and 20 supplies and, maybe, I don't know, 5 knowledge and a little bit of influence, and boom, you can go and, if you can get those resources together and you can spend the downtime actions, or the town, maybe it's a town project, and then in which case everybody can contribute. And then once you do that, the project is done. So now somebody had an idea too, by the way, about leaderboard. Sean says maybe Farsight can generate knowledge. It's not the worst idea. It's not the worst idea. I mean, again, I want players to have ways of interacting with the game vis-a-vis these resources. And this is just an ad hoc, abstract way of sort of representing the tools that you would use in town to get things done, basically. So let me think what else. Sea voyage phase. I mean, Bob and I worked on this, and I really like, I think, what we've come up with for the sea voyage phase. We still need to figure out like how hard is it to build a ship? Like, we want it to be something that's possible, but we also don't want it to be easy. I will say this might have some. Oh, maybe did we solve that? The other problem we have is with people dying. And how that's going to affect the game. And, I think we're basically going to use some sort of like inheritance system where your stuff will transfer to your new character. But we were talking about like things like, wealth and supplies will transfer at 100%, and stuff like influence and knowledge will only transfer at like 50%. So if you have like a ton of these supplies or these resources, that you'll lose some of it. And like I said, the magical items are probably going to be, maybe linked, but maybe they can pass on to the person who's inheriting them. So that's something that we still have to figure out because people are going to die. That is the case there. Let's see what else. Now for town, what I was going to do here is, I'm imagining that the town is going to have buildings in it at the start of the game. And basically, buildings are going to allow you to take a certain type of downtime action. Right? So like one building might be called the workshop. And, you don't have to actually physically think of placing your character token in that building. But the workshop is going to be what's going to allow you to interact with crafting, say, for an example. Okay. However, one of the main ideas of the game is that the community of players is going to be able to build future buildings in the town as a group effort, as a community. And these new future buildings will then give people new access to new types of downtime actions. So one of the things that, it's already 9 o'clock, but one of the things that I'm probably going to try to work on here this weekend is figuring out what these exact buildings do. And my general idea here is that I want to have buildings that let you obtain resources or exchange or trade resources. And basically, you're going to use your downtime actions to sort of be able to maybe shift some of what resources you have available. So what am I talking about? Like I'm just imagining this. Imagine that there's like there's the there's the council chamber. And if you go to the council chamber, you can exchange knowledge for influence. Right? And the idea here is we still want to tie these back to the player characters. And so what we're probably going to do is make some sort of skill check. And the player, by the way, a lot of this is going to be on the honor system. I mean, people are going to roll it using our Discord bot in like a channel. And technically, we might be able to go back and audit it. But for the most part, we're just relying on players doing the right thing. And you're going to be asked to keep a log of all the things that you did that's available to us. And Bob is much more like, gung-ho about trying to keep people honest and audit check people. I don't really, to me, I'm like, if you feel like the need to cheat in this game, you've got something worse. You got something going on with you that maybe you need this more than I need a fair game. But anyways, there'll be some sort of skill check. Maybe for the council chamber, what do we got in Dragonbane? Persuasion, is that one? Here's our character sheet. Please wait, rendering. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before. Okay, that took a long time. So persuasion is a check. So we might allow a character or a skill to basically, you can spend one of your downtime actions, and then after you've spent your downtime action, you would make a persuasion check. And you would do this in this log. And depending on the results of the persuasion check, whether you passed or failed, and one of the things that we're doing here, again, very similar to Blaze in the Dark, is even if you fail the check, we're still going to let you do the thing. You'll just do the thing at a lesser rate or lesser exchange. So, maybe if you pass the persuasion check, you get +2. And if you fail the persuasion check, you get +1. I'm just making this up. I don't know. The numbers and the math have to do this. And so the idea is is that if your character has a lot of knowledge and a good persuasion skill, your character in town can use the council chamber to build up a lot of influence. And then there's going to be things that are going to be available that are going to cost a lot of influence. Like one of the ideas I have is there will be something that you can buy, and it's going to be called, the Council of Elders, or like the Council of Lords, right? And this is going to be a group that gets to decide certain decisions for the town. But starting in the game, no PCs are a member of the Council of Lords. If a PC spends 50 influence, I'm making this number up, okay? If a PC spends 50 influence, that player character, you the player, you are invited to the Council of Lords. And in Discord, we would open up, there's a chat that you now get access to, a private channel. And this is where the other Council of Lords, people who have built up this influence and bought this, title, can have a little private chat, sneaky chat. They can share whatever they want. They can keep it hidden. It's up to them. But periodically, me, Bob, the overlords, we are going to say, hey, the town, a decision has to be made, and it's going to be made by the Council of Lords. And if you're not a member of the Council of Lords, now you might try to persuade or bribe people who are on the Council of Lords, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the people who are on the Council of Lords, and we might have like a majority vote or some sort of ranked choice voting or something like that. But the council will make a decision, and they will shape the course of the game, maybe for more politically oriented things, right? Like imagine Bob Redbeard, the fearsome pirate lord of the Scarlet Brotherhood, doesn't get killed by the sweet band of adventurers. And the pirate captain, basically comes in and says, hey, I'm offering you a way out. If you guys bribe me considerably, I will leave the city alone. And I'm like, and the group that gets to make that decision is the Council of Lords. And you got that by spending all your influence. So like, this is like an example of where like, and now where did you get that influence? Well, from your knowledge. Where'd you get that knowledge from? From playing the game. Ideally, you got it from adventuring. But, you might have also gotten it from, I don't know, maybe there's a library building where someone can go and they can make a, languages check, or what else might be a good one? Languages, maybe myths and legends. I'm not quite sure which one. We'd pick one. They make that languages check, and they might gain a knowledge. So there's going to be ways. Now, of course, studying at the library, going into the library, this isn't modern era, to be able to get into the library, it costs like, maybe it costs 2 wealth or 1 wealth, or maybe it costs an influence or something like that in order to be able to have access to the library. So not everybody can just go there. You need money or you need influence. Well, how am I going to get influence? I need knowledge to get influence. Well, then you need wealth. Well, where can I get wealth? You guessed it, gold coins and adventuring. So these buildings are going to basically be ways that you can sort of shape and mold what your character is good at, and what what you kind of want to do and function for the city. And like I said, the community at large is going to have these projects to build new buildings or change the campaign world, and those are going to be things that you can invest your resources into. But there's also going to be personal things that you might want for your character, things like your ship. And so now you have to make some kind of interesting decisions, right? I've just got, I just went on an adventure and we found a shipwreck, and my character came back and I have a ton of wealth and I have a ton of supplies, and I'm starting to maybe it's time to make my own ship, right? I've been saving up. I've got enough. I'm ready to do it. Heyo.
Jason the alternate egg. Tipped $5. Fire fund. Fire. Money bag. Hyped for Dragontide. Dragon. Ocean wave.
Dragon Ocean Wave. That's the alternative title for now on. Jason, thank you for the Fire Fund support. Thank you so much for that. And I'm glad to hear that you're excited for it. Again, I'm excited people are going to be able to play Dragonbane. That's awesome. But what I'm hoping we can create here is an experience that takes what we learned from Northern Reaches and tries to create an experience that's a little bit easier for people to play with that aren't necessarily dedicating their lives to the game, but can still make an influence and can still sort of add to it. So thank you, Jason. So you get what I was saying was like, you might have a lot of wealth and supplies that you've saved up, and now you get this opportunity to start building your own ship. But then somebody in town starts a new public works project, right? Which is going to be like, like a deep water harbor, right? They want to make it so that the larger ships can come into harbor, which is going to like maybe bring in more trade and increase the number of, I don't know, something. It's going to change something for the betterment of everybody. But the deep water harbor project needs, right, a ton of wealth and supplies. And so there's kind of this interesting choice as a player, which do I invest into? And this is where I will end it, even though this is kind of a solved thing. So Bob is going to be mad at me. But this is where I come up with my last thing. And I understand that this could potentially be a little bit controversial because it doesn't matter. But I'm kind of creating a system so that we can see who won the game. Now, I've seen the people who are members of the Knights of Last Call Discord, and there are some people who don't give a shit, but there are other people who they want to compete, they want to win, and that's why there is going to be it's not really a resource, but there is going to be something called prestige. And this, by the way, is very much taken from Legend of the Five Rings, the idea of it. And prestige is basically like, are you the great hero of the city or not? And one of the surefire, easiest, best ways to earn prestige is you will get plus prestige. By the way, if you're a board game fan, think of these as victory points. You gain prestige by doing badass adventures. And this will be another lever, another knob that our GMs will be able to award players with. So if your group of adventurers goes to an island, you wander around in the woods for a little bit, and you find some, special plants, and you harvest them, and you fight some goblins, and you get a little bit of loot, and you come home, I would hope, I'm not gonna force any GM to do anything that they don't want to do, but I'm gonna hope that GM says, I'm awarding you no prestige. That was pretty mid, right? If the group goes and they kill a monster or they do something, kind of with, a little bit of gravitas, maybe you get a prestige point or two. If that group goes and kills Bob Redbeard, that should be like 5, I don't know, or 10, whatever our scale is. We'll give some guidelines. Prestige should be something that is legendary and represents your character building up this reputation for being, a lord or the lady of the people, right? A true hero of the people. But the other way that you're going to earn prestige is through contributing to town projects. So when your character makes a decision to use all that wealth and supplies that they have acquired, now you could go and build your ship. And maybe this is part of your long plan to eventually have even greater wealth and prestige. But the character who goes and says, I'm going to invest a lot of my personal resources into this town project, or maybe there's like a town challenge that the group has to deal with. The plague has, the plague is ripping through the town, and there's a project to cure the plague. And, obviously this would require, a little bit of money and probably some supplies, but probably a lot of knowledge, right? Would probably be the main thing that it would need. And your character has a lot of knowledge, and you spend it helping to cure the town of the plague. Well, in addition to changing the game and altering the course of its history, that's the type of action that will also earn you prestige. So it's kind of a way of, earning victory points. And so one of the things that we'll probably do, if, as Bob says, he's going to be tracking them, is, and I'm just doing this because I'm, whatever, I think it's fun, is we'll probably keep we'll update, who in town has the most wealth, who in town has the most, maybe it's a top 10, right? And so there's this idea of you could be like, I'm the wealthiest PC in the game. I have the most influence in the game, right? I have the most prestige in the game, or I'm number 3, or I'm number 2. And for some people, they won't care at all. And that's totally fine. I'm not even saying that that's the case, but there will be people for whom this will be a great motivator for them to go enjoy the game. Because again, people go, shouldn't the game just be fun just to go and play? Yes, it should. And it is. And for those people, we don't have to do anything. Okay. We give them nothing and they enjoy the game regardless. Great. That person's very easy to take care of. But I am trying to expand the scope here, and I am trying to give different players different avenues of not only playing with the game, engaging with the game, but also different ways for them to feel like they are winning. And Dragonbane, by and large, is not a game where numbers go burr. Okay, your hit points don't really change that much. Your skills don't change that much. But for that type of player, I could easily imagine where their goal, might be to get onto that top 10 prestige list. And as the game goes deeper, they might be like, my goal is to be number 1. I want to be the number 1 most prestigious PC at the end of the game. And, maybe there's maybe a little vanity title or reward or something like that we give out. So I'm not saying it's like without any merit. But for some people, they won't care about that. But for some people, they will. And so a lot of my game design with this mega game, this is what this all thing was about, is I want to provide different ways for people to enjoy and interact with Dragontide. Again, let me be clear. Everything I was just talking about here, knowledge, wealth, prestige, you could completely ignore it. Your character doesn't need to do any of this. You could just go on your adventure, come back home, take your gold, just go buy some new items from the book, and then go on another adventure. And you can just play Dragonbane, and there you will have to go through your little sea voyage phase, but it's 15 minutes, tops is what we're going for. And it isn't just Dragonbane. You got to accept that. If you want to play just Dragonbane, there's plenty of opportunities to do that in other places. But you don't. This is opt-in complexity, right? It's opt-in complexity. You don't have to interact with it if you don't want to. And there may very well be characters who never interact with any of the, they don't interact with the town and the resources. They don't interact with any of the crafting. They are just completely content. And this isn't Pathfinder 2. You don't need a Storm Silver Axe in order to be, CR appropriately balanced against this level 12 monster. That isn't a thing. I don't, from my quick look at the book of Dragonbane, my sense here is that a dragon with its ferocity 3, that means it gets 3 turns per combat round. It's 84 hit points and it's 6 armor. I mean, this thing is just going to destroy and kill everybody anyways. By the way, remember, like I said, the average PC is going to have like 12 hit points. Okay. It's Dragon Bite. There's no attack roll for monsters in Dragonbane, by the way. This thing just does 4d10. Boom. I don't know if you know the math on that. That's an average of 22 damage. Now, of course, a player could evade this, but you're getting my point, right? Which is one hit from this thing and you're done. You're dead. So scary. Say nothing of the fire breath. I like how they throw in here too. Your armor doesn't even do anything. So yeah, these dragons are incredibly scary. And in a weird way, it almost doesn't matter whether your character is brand new and you just rolled them up the other day, or you've been playing for a few months. Like, this thing is just not fair. So you having a storm silver axe or not isn't going to make the difference. I'm not going to say, oh, you can't go fight, you can't go fight a griffin because you don't have the right level equipment, That's not a thing. It's an option. So everything here is designed, again, to just be optional. Which reminds me, for Dragonbane people, that's another reason why I hate waiting. Because you can make it so that the dragon goes first, and so you always have your evade up, which I don't like. Whereas if the initiative is random, truly random, then, if you go before the dragon, you're like, shit. I either have to use my attack and waste it or literally do nothing, and maybe it won't ever attack me. But anyways, I'm getting off topic here. That's more of a Dragonbane thing that I probably won't change because, again, my goal is not to change Dragonbane too much. But again, you may not ever actually interact with any of this. So what do we need to do before we launch? Let's figure that out. Okay, so in town, I need to create the basic buildings or the basic DTA actions. I should note we didn't really talk about them here, but you can also train. You can actually spend your actions and your resources in town to get better at some of your skills. It's a slow process. It's a lot quicker and easier to go adventure. But if you want to, you can spend your time in town to train up. So we need to create the basic DTA actions. I need to decide what resource economy looks like. And what by that I mean, like, how much of these things, are we rewarding? Is it ones and twos and threes? Is it threes and fives and eights? Is it tens and 50s and hundreds? Probably not that. But like, what's the level of resource? And we have this basic idea that wealth and supplies are kind of, common, and influence and knowledge are uncommon, and, mana is rare. So we need to decide what those actions are, decide what the resources are. We need to, so this is Bob, and I don't dislike this idea. We need to decide for ships, what they cost and what they do. And we have an idea of what they do. They are going to help you or affect you during that sea voyage phase. But, and you can tell me if you could totally opt out of this. I cannot stress this enough. All of these things are opt-in. I want to just give players options. Remember, Dragonbane is fun. It may not be the most complicated game, but it's fun. Okay? But it may not be the most complex game. And, you might play one Dragonbane a game a week. It took you, 3 or 4 hours. You had fun with it, but you're like, man, I really want to interact with this more. And that's where this stuff comes in. So Bob, which again, I don't think it's a bad idea. Bob has this idea. He wants different sizes of ships, which is fine. Like you might start off with a small little sailboat, a little dinghy, right? And then eventually you might expand that into like a cutter or to a sloop or, even to like a cog or a caravel, right? And remember, this is medieval time. This is before the age of sail. So there's no like 17 deck cannon galleons, at least not at the start. I mean, people have done crazier shit. But like Bob liked the idea that everybody's ship is a little different. And so you might get your ship and, your ship has sort of a basic set of statistics because it's, whatever. Maybe this is a sloop. But Bob, and again, I like this idea. Bob liked the idea. Oh, that's very thin. Bob liked the idea that every ship, depending on its size, would have a number of open slots. And these are what you can, once you have your ship, then you can start upgrading your ship. And you can customize your ship to be really good at certain things. Like maybe you're the person in town who builds the ship that's really good for going and hunting pirates. Maybe somebody else builds their ship and they're like, extra sails and, catamaran hull or something like that. Aerodynamic hull or something like that. Your ship is the fastest ship in all of the, Dragontide. This is going to give players a opportunity so that their boats, their ships, I should say, are different from one another. And there may be a reason why you want to go take, Wojo's ship and not take Rule of Cool's ship, or maybe vice versa. Now, pursuant to this, I like people having to make choices, and I like players having to make tough choices. And so one of the options that I'm going to give people, because again, some people might want to really have a boat and they don't play that much. Okay, well, there's going to be two uses to your boat. You can use your boat to go sail into adventure and, maybe try to return with, the loot and treasure and booty and rewards that come from those, mysterious fast islands. But another option that you can have is once your boat is of large enough size, obviously if you have a rowboat, it's not going back. But part of the idea of this is more meta. This is still a West Marches style game. And what does that mean? Well, my idea is that far off to the east, okay, there's the main, there's the main continents, okay? This is where, this is where civilization is. This is where the great kingdoms of men and dwarves and elves are, right? This is North Africa, right? This is like France and Spain. And the idea is for Dragontide is that, it's kind of an Atlantis, and it's kind of an Atlantis analogy, but once there was this mythical continent, far off across an unknown and uncharted sea, right? This is a danger zone voyage, right? This is like lost to myth and legend. And, many thousands of years ago, and this is part of Dragonbane's lore, we're just sort of adopting it, is, the dragons and the demons had their great war. And as part of this, we don't know why or what happened. As part of this once great kingdom, or this once great continent, shattered, and it broke apart into all these islands. So these aren't this isn't an archipelago in the traditional sense. It's an archipelago of this shattered continent. And this is also why we can explain why there's a bunch of weird magic shit going on, and why we might have an island that is, full of frost and blizzards, and we also might have an island that is sweltering volcano land. Because it's weird, and there's strange magic and weird storms and weird magic. And this is also why those strange special materials like the storm silver or the frost steel can only be found here in this land. And not, maybe not that long ago, but, not enough for it to be civilized. This is still a very dangerous voyage. And here on this first island to the east, this is sort of the port city that all the players, live on. And so when you go on an adventure, you leave the port city and you sail to the to the adventuring island, and you have your adventure, and then you come back to the port city. Well, one of the options that players will have is once their ships, they can actually send their ships back to the mainland and have it come back. And again, this will be a way for them to earn more wealth and earn more prestige and earn more influence, because they're basically, shipping back the treasures and the rare resources of this once magical, broken, forgotten kingdom. So anyways, ships are going to have options for people to expand and upgrade, and it's going to be a huge time and money sink. Some people will never care about a ship, but for the people who do, they will. But we do need to decide, like, what is it that you can add to a ship? like what is that they actually do? And we again have some ideas, but we don't want it to be too complex, but we also don't want it to be too simple. So that is, and again, like there are some ideas like, oh, ships should have a speed and a maneuverability and stuff. And I didn't want to get that granular. I didn't want to get that, particular about it. Right. I wanted it to be a little bit more, it's actually a little bit more based on like, almost like on aspects, or you might say tags or traits, if that makes sense. So that is basically for town. Also, part of town is crafting, and I need to decide some basic recipes that everybody knows at the start of the campaigns. That way you have a little bit of stuff to potentially go off of. And we also need to figure out how rare is rare with these special materials. And and I want those quirks to be present in these items, and I just need to figure out a way to add them and to make them make sense. So that's the town phase. That's basically what we need to do to launch. The voyage phase, we kind of have actually kind of figured out. So, I mean, we have to make some tables. So for checking. Also crafting secondary skills for professions. Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, that that's easy. I mean, Bob, we could even make it where they can pick from any of them. They just can only pick one. I don't know. I'm not too particular about that. So voyage is pretty good. We do have to actually make our random voyage table. And if you've seen my stream on dynamic random encounters, then my idea with the voyage is very much based off of that. It's this idea that the actions that are happening in the game are going to influence the type of events that can occur on your voyage. And it's going to shape the kind of skills that you'll need in order to deal with those events. What do I mean by that? Let's say that pirate attacks are on the rise. The Council of Lords chose not to give in to Bob Redbeard's demand, and they said, "We will fight you. We will fight you at the docks. We will fight you in the high seas. We will not, submit to you." And so Bob and I go, we respect that decision. So then Bob and I come over to our random voyage table, and we add a bunch of pirate attacks to the table. Okay? And now suddenly sailing on the seas becomes more dangerous. It's random, but it becomes more dangerous, and more pirates are going to attack. And this means that, before the biggest threat might have been the wind, the weather, and the waves, but now it's pirates. And not only do you have to be prepared for a potentially hazardous sailing voyage, but now you need to make sure that your ship is prepared to repel pirates and boarders, that you have people who can fight on ships and are ready to fight, because there might be a pirate attack. Now, of course, can our ship take a condition for a reroll? No, but there is this idea that different upgrades to different ships might help you deal with certain types of challenges or certain types of problems. And for me, I'm not going to lie, this is where the rubber meets the road. Because imagine that these pirate attacks are kind of a pain in the ass. And people are getting kind of upset because they're like, man, our ships keep getting messed up. We keep landing on the island, but we're already kind of hurt, or we've taken, at the start of the adventure, my character was exhausted. My character was disheartened because we had to, we got our asses kicked by pirates. Now remember, nothing here is going to prevent you from ever adventuring. That's not something that we're going to do. But, you know, it can make your life a little bit more miserable. And so when something happens in the game, maybe now somebody does go on that big adventure to try to kill Bob Redbeard, and they have a great adventure, and they do manage to kill him. Or maybe somebody starts a town project. We should create our own fleet, our own anti-pirate fleet. Let's hire privateers to go and engage the pirates and drive them from the seas. And we'll drive them back to their secret coves. And somebody starts a big project, and everybody contributes because they said, "Fuck these pirates," and it succeeds. People invest their time, their resources, their energy, and oh, GM Scott, buddy.
GM Scott tipped $500. Young with Bob Redbeard, or maybe just somehow a relief.
GM Scott, buddy, you are already, a very honorable and glorious men among men. Down with Bob Redbeard for sure, but thank you for the HOA woes as well. I really greatly appreciate it. You've been so kind to us. You've been so kind to this channel, supporting us with your donations, your time, your money. Also, GM Scott, I'm sad to report that you played the very last game, that Wiz War, a second edition box set that I had ever be played. It did get completely destroyed in the fire. If anything, maybe I will use your very generous tip to purchase a copy from Noble Knight Games. I think it's like $120 or something, like $140 to buy a second edition Wiz War. But thank you very much, GM Scott. I greatly appreciate it. And I think Bob might have posted a picture of it, but the last time I was over at Bob's and we were doing Dragontide stuff, we were crushing your mead, and it was unbelievably delicious. So, thank you. It is appreciated. It is well. It is well needed. I will be completely honest. As I've said before, my HOA woes kind of continue, but the long and the short of it is, my HOA changed the rule on our insurance, the way their insurance works, and they notified me. I'm sure they said they did, but they just notified me in a plain white envelope. And I get a lot of emails or a lot of letters from my condo association about, hey, there's a barbecue next week. Well, we hired a new company to do snowplow removal. And to be honest with you, I don't really read most of them or any of them. I open them up, make sure it's not somebody sending me you have a violation. You have a bird feeder in your front yard. You're not allowed to have one of those. Or they throw it away. So at some point they notified me, hey, by the way, we changed our HOA laws. The HOA will no longer be providing insurance for the inside of your home. So my insurance that I had bought for my home was not set up to cover my house. It was set up to cover my stuff, because my condo association and my HOA fee that I pay each month is supposed to pay for that. Well, they got rid of that. And I wasn't aware. So I am very underinsured for this situation. So shouldn't there be at least 12 months notice in case people are locked into it? You would think that would be the case, but this apparently went into effect at the end of November in 2023. So it's been active for 6 or 7 months now, 8 months maybe. But I literally did not. So for the last 8 months so let me be clear about something here. This could have been incredibly way worse. If the fire had actually spread and done damage, Bob, take care, buddy. Forbidden Lands tomorrow. Although no one else has responded, and even George said he's going to be late, which is scary and freakish, but we'll figure it out. See you, Bob. So anyways, if the fire had spread and it actually had done significant damage, like burning down parts of my home, I would have been uninsured for that. So one of the first things I did today was go and I upped my coverage to $250,000. This thing is getting annoying. I have to really figure out why this thing is shorting out my USB ports. Any case, the HOA is trying to silence me. Yes, they are trying to come for me. So yeah. Yeah, it could have been a lot worse, and I would have had no coverage. But one of the things I did today is I raised my coverage to $250,000 just to make sure that this won't ever happen again. It was a whopping extra $200 a year to go to $250,000 worth of coverage. So, again, 6 or 7 months ago, if they could have actually really done a better job of notifying me, maybe with a certified letter or something like that, I could have just spent $200 and 15 minutes on the phone with my agent and upgraded my insurance, and it would have been fine. But instead, I am in a really unfortunate situation. So, but thankfully, I have incredible patrons and folks like GM Scott, and some of the other people who have donated, significant amounts of money. Erica, John, Gull, so many people have. The list is too long, but all of you are just incredibly gracious. So, thank you for that. But yeah, so. This is what I really want to focus on here is being able, this is for me, this is what I love about games. I love it when the player's actions change the actual game mechanics, not just FBT. It's not just fluffy bullshit time. It's not just me going, you guys killed the pirates. Yay. No, killing the pirates means that some things in the game itself change, and ideally change for the better for you and your fellow players. I think that's very empowering. It's one thing to win, but a lot of times when you win in these games, nothing changes about the game. It's just kind of FBT. The town is saved. I mean, great. I feel better. I feel good about it. We destroyed the giant army and we saved the town. Okay. So now what? Right. And so I like it when the victories and successes of the party members can really influence and change the way that they play the game. So I got about 15 minutes left. So I kind of tried to explain my design philosophy here. And again, you can understand why, for me, there's this tension between wanting to try to make the game interesting and maybe add a little bit of complexity, but also understand that, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. And you can't just keep adding complexity because eventually you are just getting so little benefit for what you're adding. But I'm taking advantage of the fact that this is sort of opt-in, that players don't have to do this, to sort of really leverage, what I'm capable of doing. So anybody have any questions or anything like that they want to ask? About anything, I suppose, is fine. About Dragontide, if there's something I didn't talk about, I'd be happy to answer it. Somebody asked, how are heroic abilities going to work in Dragontide? Well, easy. One, if you get an 18, you can get a new heroic ability. Yay. But we also like the idea that GM should be able to be kind of able to reward heroic abilities. Unfortunately, that's a lot of power to give to a GM, because you might be playing with different players at different times, and we don't want some GMs who are just handing out HAs all the time. And also, it's very binary. You either get one or you don't get one. So what we're going to do instead is we are going to include this is a reward that the GMs can give you. The GMs can award you heroic deeds, and this is a number that you get added. And heroic deeds are when your characters do badass, awesome things, or things that the GM thought were funny or awesome, or basically it's a way of saying you played really well, or maybe you just made an incredibly clutch roll, or you landed the killing shot on the manticore right before it was about to wipe the party, and the GM says, "Yeah, that was awesome. That was a major heroic deed. Get 3 heroic deeds," and then you can spend these heroic deeds to buy new HAs. And this is based off of a tiering system that I did not come up with. Somebody in the Dragonbane community did. Some heroic abilities are better than other heroic abilities. So the very best heroic abilities are going to cost 15 of these deeds. The mid-tier ones are going to be 10, and the kind of more flavor ones are going to be 5. So this is a way for us to sort of still allow GMs to kind of award HAs, but instead of awarding them or not awarding them, aka 100% or 0, they're going to be able to fractionally award them, but they're still kind of awarding the same thing, which is doing heroic actions and cool deeds. Are you going to include some factions? Yeah. So Lord Dragon. So this is going to be how we determine the type of events and the type of random encounters that are occurring on these different things. The overlords are basically going to have, like, I mentioned before, the Scarlet Brotherhood. That might be a faction. And as a result of that, that is going to influence, some of the events that happen in the town. It's going to influence some of the events that happen on random encounter tables. And like I said, it's kind of like a front, right? From Powered by the Apocalypse, from Dungeon World. If that Scarlet Brotherhood isn't stopped, then, they're going to go to the next thing on our plan or on our list. Now, that's not the same thing as a meta plot, because I'm not saying that this is going to happen. It's like a front where I have the impending dooms kind of laid out, and the power of the Scarlet Brotherhood would continue to grow. They would expand to new island groups. They would start to influence what's happening in town. You can't send your ships home for merchant activities anymore because the pirate attacks have made that impossible. Or if you do, there's a 50% chance that your ship gets raided and all of its stuff stolen. So players are like, oh, okay, maybe we should deal with this now. And then maybe they don't deal with it. And then it goes to the third category, right? It's just something insane,
Tabletop nerd Josh tipped $50. Who needs insurance when you got as great of a community that you have built?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And not just for the money, which is very appreciated and is very awesome. And I'm very humbled by it. But for pointing out that, the community is what's great. And, it's one of those things where, what comes around what goes around comes around. We've done, fundraisers for patrons in the past who have had some hard times. And I've always been very impressed with this community's ability to come out and support those people. In those cases, a lot of times, those are people who are literally complete strangers, people you've never met before. In theory, you all have some sort of relationship with me. I'm sure especially if you're a patron, I'm sure we've conversed on the Discord, or maybe we've conversed here in chat. But either way, there's a little bit more of a connection. Some of you, obviously, I've hung out with, played games with, gone to conventions with. But when you build that community up, I never thought that I would be the one benefiting from that kind of, those bonds of friendship and fellowship that we've all formed. So I'm very thankful for everyone in this community. And, I don't really want to take even credit for building it. I might have started it, but the community itself has been pretty self-propagating. So that's been pretty amazing and awesome. But thank you, Josh. That is very appreciated. So yeah, our goal here is to try to get this done, I would say probably after Gen Con, and try to get it done here in the next couple of weeks and get it, get it out. Man from Nan, have you thought about awarding inventory points for defeating cannon fodder that players can use for basic adventuring gear instead of having to sell every little thing? Kind of. That's what I was talking about with using supply. Supply was just going to be sort of this generic abstract resource. So we didn't, to be clear, this is just a time-saving device, right? And, if somebody's like, I want that sword, cool, pick it up. I'm not saying it's got to convert into, if you need a short sword, the monster had a short sword, take it, or the goblin had a short sword, take it, put it on your gear, it's yours. But all the rest of that stuff, whatever. I'm saying we can just convert it to something called supplies. And, you have to carry it. It'll just be abstract. And then rather than dealing with individual things, we can just convert it into that basic idea. So it's, kind of the same idea. That being said, one of my original proposals, I wasn't pro or against it. I asked the group, do you guys want to do any sort of quantum inventory system, right? Like inventory points from Fabula Ultima. And really, by and large, there was very strong support for no, don't do that. We really like that in Dragonbane, you have to choose, you only have so many inventory slots. It's your strength divided by half. That's not a lot. So if you have 12 strength, you can only carry 6 units of stuff. And so there was a lot of pushback on saying we really like it that that the characters can't just pull a rabbit out of a hat, basically, and that they have to be kind of smart, I guess would be the term I would say, in what they prepare. And if they don't prepare it, if they don't bring it, then they don't have it, and that's kind of part of the fun of the game as well. So I respect that, and I didn't want to mess with that too much. That being said, I am all for, saving time, and I don't want these sessions to get bogged down at the end with a bunch of people trying to sell every little thing. And, money's tight, and I get it. There's kind of an old school vibe to Dragonbane a little bit. So like, early on, you might not be getting a lot of money, and you might go, wow, well, yeah, they had 20 silver, but all their gear is worth like 6 gold if we sold it. So yeah, we're going to strip them and we're going to, take their stuff. So it's kind of a balancing act as well. I mean, because I want inventory, considerations to be a real thing. Because secretly, one of the things that I like and I dislike about Dragonbane is how a lot of groups very quickly, either because somebody was a merchant or because they bought one, it's very easy to buy like a donkey and a cart. And I know donkeys and carts and stuff have their own problems and drawbacks. I get it. It's not a perfect solution. It's not a bag of holding. Let's be clear. But the donkey and the cart give you like 50 inventory slots. So it kind of makes the inventory component not really much of an issue. But because the boats that you're starting on are small boats, they're not these big, you're thinking this Pirates of the Caribbean boat. We are so far away from that, especially in the medieval time period, but especially with the boats that they're starting with. The players won't have room to take donkeys and carts. They are going to have to carry everything in their packs. And that means that, when the players are awarded with gold or particularly silver or copper, how much you can carry is going to be a real factor. When the group finds one of these rare special materials, like a storm, they find a unit of storm silver ore. Well, someone's going to have to carry that back, to town. So that means it has to be in your inventory. And so I think that there's going to be a little bit more fun of like of a game of trying to figure out how you carry stuff, what you carry, and all those other things. It also provides us with a kind of a cool lever, like, in the book in Dragonbane, a backpack increases your carrying capacity by 2, which is great. It does not count towards your encumbrance, but you can only carry 1 backpack at a time. So a lot of people are going to have a backpack, so you kind of get half your strength plus 2. But you could easily imagine where a crafter, right, a leather worker, right, can make a, superior backpack, and it can carry 3, or it increases your carrying capacity by 3. It's not game breaking, but it's some cool thing that only a player crafter can make. And to make it, they need some special materials that they got from adventuring, or that they acquired from other PCs who got them from adventuring. And so it gives us these little fun little levers, to play with, which I like. I like levers. I like giving levers to players. I like giving levers to GMs. It's little things that you can play with, and it's a fun way to feel like you're progressing in a sort of incremental way in a game that doesn't necessarily have the most clear-cut progression. And that's one of the things, by the way, that I really like, because in D&D you go from, I have a backpack and I can carry whatever I want, but theoretically there's a weight limit, and then what's the next upgrade? A bag of holding, right? Or like a Heward's handy haversack. Either way, you now have an extra dimensional space that can carry everything. And so it's like in D&D, inventory just goes from not really an issue, but it could be, to not an issue at all forever. Pathfinder's the same way. And that feels like, like you're leaving something down on the ground there. Like I think that it's cool that there's this fun progression for that. And we don't have to go to the full magical extreme of you have an extra dimensional space, which is why I really like it. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we talked about is that, we expect is that at the beginning of every session, when you have a new group of players who are getting together, maybe these PCs have never played with each other before. They know each other. They talk on the Discord all the time, but maybe they've never adventured together before. They don't necessarily know what everybody's PCs are. There's going to be this kind of prep phase, right? And maybe they're even doing it ideally, right? Going way back to what I was talking about with diplomacy. Maybe your adventure is Friday night and the GM is going to run you through their adventure, but it's Thursday. It's during the middle of the day. And you and your fellow party members who are about to go on that expedition tomorrow are chatting in the Discord, in the Dragontide channels, in maybe a private channel or whatever. You're talking about like, what should I bring? Who does anybody have this? okay, we should bring at least one of those. Maybe we should bring two. Well, I have one, but well, if I bring that, then I can't bring my other thing, right? Like there's this fun preparation phase, but it's not like an official part of the game, but it's something that's going to happen. It's something that's going to encourage that community communication. That sort of, making sure that you have somebody who can do this, who has this, and has all that stuff, So you came in, you played, and now you're back, and we're still live. But we are about to wrap up because I am going to wrap up at 10. So you did make it back just in time, Sarak. I think it'll be fun. It'll be interesting. I mean, I don't expect to get as many people for Dragontide as we do for Northern Reaches because Pathfinder 2 is just a much bigger game. And I actually think Northern Reaches Season 3 is going to be really great. I think Core 2, I think Core in general, but Core 2 I think has done a good job. I mean, there's still things I would change, but I think that they have tightened up the game quite a bit. And I think a lot of people are going to be really excited to sort of play with this kind of new version of the game, which is exciting. Smith has created some really interesting changes that I happen to know about Northern Reaches Season 3. And in some ways we've stepped back. We understand that with Northern Reaches, there's a lot of people who really just enjoy that Pathfinder experience, and we want to make sure that they get that experience. So, we kind of have stepped back some of the complexity in some ways. We still want to give people those fun tools. And we've also passed it over to the GM Council. So they're really going to help us there with sort of adminning the game and sort of creating the game that they want to experience instead of the game that, I want or Smith wants. But that's where we're at. So I think Dragontide has some cool options. I think Dragonbane's a fun game. I think it's, silly and fun and quick, and it's not like the most, deep game. Like I always say, you can get a PhD in, 3rd edition D&D or maybe Pathfinder 2. But this is a game where it's like, you just need a high school diploma. You just need a GED. There's no point. There's no higher ed for Dragonbane. There's no meta to break or to solve. There just isn't. I mean, there's some basic principles that you can be good at or bad at, but by and large, it's not that much more of a complex game, which is great. And then we'll add a little bit of fun and complexity, and we'll add some ships and we'll add some cool little town stuff, and I think people will have fun with it. We'll build a cool map, and if at the end of the season, people have had some great adventures, some funny stories, some amazing times. They feel proud of the town that they built. We have a really cool map that we've put up of everybody's islands, and you can look at that map. And like I'm imagining, like I'm not. By the way, this is how Derik operates. By the way, this is the kind of shit this is why Knights of the Last Call doesn't make money. At the end of the season, we've got that map, which is made up of everybody's islands and maybe some little details. I go and I contract an artist, I pay them $500 or something. And I say, hey, there's this kind of rough sketched map that we built during the course of this game. Can you turn this into like a real looking like nautical map? Can you do that for us? Here's $500. What, $1,000? Fine. Do it. Take it. I don't care. We won't take money this month. And then everybody can go and look at that map, and there's like a sense of pride because you can look at that map and go, well, that was my island. Or you could say, oh man, I remember when I did that awesome adventure on that island, or I did this awesome thing on this island. But then also what's fun is when you look at that map and you might go, man, I never made it to that island. I never got to go there. There's this kind of like FOMO, but also pride. Like that, if everybody can kind of experience that at the end of the season, then that's why we played the whole game, is so that you can have that kind of memory, that reminiscence, that nostalgia, and to have had that experience and to be able to share it with others. I think that's the real meat of a role-playing game. All right. Well, that's it. That's going to wrap it up for us tonight. I appreciate everybody kind of hanging out with me. Cybersmith, thank you. Sorrel, thank you. Tabletop Nerd, Josh, Jason, thank you all for your very generous tips. And GM Scott, what can I say?
I am strong.
KC, well, take care. I'm glad you're excited. And, stay tuned. If you're a patron, we're going to be talking more about this, I'm sure, as we kind of get ready to closer to launch. But I'm excited for it, and I think it'll be fun. And, again, this year, NR Season 3. Dragontide. Next year, maybe Legend of the Five Rings. Rokugan, baby. Aww.
Lazarus Dark tipped $50. Doggo Fund. Just had to have cancer surgically removed from my cat's neck, so I'm right there with you.
Well, buddy, thank you so much for that. You know, I haven't been focusing on that as much, but you know, this fire thing came at the worst possible time because my dog is going in actually the day after Gen Con, if I go, that Monday, is going in for very expensive surgery. Luckily, it is not as scary as cancer. It's just a knee surgery. But my dog is 10 and he's my everything. And, you know, surgeries have risks. And I would be lying to you if I said I wasn't nervous as hell about it. And I'm kind of just ignoring it and focusing on the things I can control. But you know, and so, you know, that's an expensive surgery, but, you know, I don't know, you know, maybe my dog has 3 years, 4 years, maybe God willing, 5 or 6 years left. But if I can make his time here more comfortable, pain-free, let him run and play and do all the stuff that he wants, then for me, that's, you know, if I had to choose between getting, you know, replacing all my woodworking gear that got burned up in the fire, all my festool tools and all my stuff, or getting my dog a surgery, I mean, it's a no-brainer. And as I said before, because of so many people's generous donations, including this one from Lazarus Dark, you know, we're going to be able to get him his surgery, and I'm going to be able to replace my stuff, even if the HOA completely, you know, fucks me over. So that's been a huge blessing and just a huge relief. So thank you for that, Laz. Appreciate you so much. Thank you, Ken. Next year, season 4E. I mean, 4E would be another good game for different reasons, but for sure. We're going to get, well, the fire kind of set us back a little bit, but eventually I'm going to run some 4E games, and I want to run it as sort of like a challenge league in a weird way, almost like, not like League of Legends, but like I want there to be like a ladder. I don't know how I would describe it, but there's an element of 4E. I want to lean into kind of the combat of sport, kind of like PBX Karma, but with 4E in a way. But I want to include some other things in it than just fighting, right? Like some skill challenges and stuff. So you have to build these kind of well-rounded parties. Anyways, I'm getting off track. Thank you everybody for hanging out. Probably not going to be a Sunday stream, but you know, you never know. I like hanging out with y'all, and you guys make me really appreciate the community that I have. So it makes it a lot easier to want to spend time with you all. But thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace out, everybody. Peace.